Hey everyone, welcome in. Tonight's Reddit stories are here to keep you company while you rest. Let them play while you wind down. If you want more nights like this, subscribe. It's completely free. And don't forget to leave a good night comment so no one feels like they're listening alone. My girlfriend's past relationship is making me question our future. I am a 27-year-old guy living in the Midwest, and I have been with my girlfriend for a little over a year now. Her name is Emily, and she is also 27. We met through mutual friends at a housewarming party and hit it off fast. She was easy to talk to, funny without trying too hard, and she seemed grounded in a way I really respected. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was building something real with someone. For context, I am a mixed race guy with a black father and a white mother. I grew up very aware of racism because it was not abstract to me. It was comments from classmates, looks from strangers, and a few ugly moments that still sit in my head years later. Emily knows all of this. We talked about it early on because it shapes how I see the world and how I choose the people I let close to me. About 6 months into our relationship, we were talking late one night about past relationships. Nothing dramatic, just the usual how long, why it ended, what we learned stuff. Emily hesitated more than usual when I asked about her longest relationship. She told me she dated a guy named Tyler for about 4 years, from when she was 20 until she was almost 25. I asked why it ended, and she said they grew apart and wanted different things. That sounded normal enough, so I did not push. A few weeks later, we were at a small get-together with some of her college friends. Alcohol was involved, but nobody was wasted. Someone made a comment about how Emily used to argue with Tyler all the time, and another friend joked that it was hard to date someone who was angry at the whole world. Emily went quiet. I did not know what they were talking about, so I asked later when we got home. That was when everything shifted. Emily sat me down and told me there was more to the Tyler story. She said Tyler was deeply racist. Not casually ignorant, not edgy jokes, but full-on hardcore racist. She said he believed in white supremacy, followed extremist forums, and regularly used slurs in private. She said he never went to rallies or anything public, but his beliefs were not subtle. He talked about it all the time at home. She said at the time she thought she could change him or that he would grow out of it. I remember feeling like the air left the room. I asked her how she could stay with someone like that for 4 years. She said she was young, insecure, and had terrible boundaries. She said she argued with him constantly and hated his views, but stayed because she thought love meant fixing someone. She also said she was embarrassed and ashamed of that period of her life. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was spiraling. This was not some short bad judgment fling. This was 4 years. 4 years of sharing a bed, a home, holidays, and daily life with someone who openly believed people like me were lesser. I asked her if she ever agreed with him or defended him. She said no. She said she fought him on it all the time, and that it was one of the biggest sources of conflict in their relationship. Over the next few days, I could not stop thinking about it. I replayed every interaction I had ever had with Emily, every kind word, every time she talked about equality and social issues. I did not think she was secretly racist now, but I could not reconcile the idea that someone with her values could tolerate that level of hatred for so long. I talked to my best friend Marcus about it. Marcus is someone I trust completely, and he knows my history. He told me that people make bad choices when they are young, but 4 years is not a mistake. It is a pattern. He said I had to decide whether I could truly feel safe and respected with someone who once chose to stay with a person like that. I also talked to my sister Lauren, who is white and very direct. She said that dating a racist does not automatically make Emily one, but it does say something about what she was willing to accept. She asked me a question that stuck with me. Would you ever be able to forget that she once loved someone who hated a core part of who you are? Emily noticed I was pulling away and confronted me. I told her honestly that I was struggling. She cried and said she hated herself for that relationship and wished she could erase it. She said she understood why it bothered me, but asked me not to judge her entire character by her worst decision. She said she has grown, learned, and would never tolerate that behavior now. I believe her when she says she has changed. I do not think she is lying or minimizing, but belief does not automatically equal peace. When I imagine a future together, marriage, kids, meeting extended family, I cannot shake the thought of her having once chosen to build a life with someone who would have despised our children for their skin color. There is also a trust issue I did not expect. If she could stay that long in something so fundamentally wrong, what else might she tolerate or excuse in the future? What happens if someone close to us expresses similar views? Will she truly draw the line, or will she try to keep the peace? I feel torn, because aside from this, our relationship has been healthy and supportive. She treats me well, listens, and shows up when it matters. Ending things feels like punishing her for something she cannot change. Staying feels like betraying my own values and instincts. I am not angry at her in a yelling sense. I am sad and confused. I keep thinking about younger me, the kid who felt small and unsafe in certain spaces, and whether I owe it to him to walk away from anyone who ever made room for hatred like that, even indirectly. Right now, I am considering breaking up with her, not because I think she is a bad person, but because I am not sure I can fully trust or respect someone who made that choice for so long. I do not know if this is me being fair and protecting myself, or me holding her past against her in a way that is impossible to overcome. Update. My girlfriend's past relationship is making me question our future. It has been a few weeks since I posted, and a lot has happened since then. I read through a lot of responses, and even though I did not reply much, I took the advice seriously. Some comments were supportive, some were harsh, and some called me unfair or dramatic. I expected that. What I did not expect was how much this situation would grow once I actually talked to Emily again, instead of sitting in my own head. After a few days of distance, we agreed to meet at her apartment and have a real conversation. Not a rushed one, and not one where either of us tried to win. We both agreed we would say everything even if it was uncomfortable. She looked exhausted when I got there. She said she had been barely sleeping because she felt like her past was about to cost her the best relationship she had ever had. I told her I needed more clarity, not to interrogate her, but to understand how 4 years like that actually happened. I asked questions I was scared to ask before. I asked what she did when he said racist things. I asked if she ever brought him around friends of color. I asked if she ever felt unsafe challenging him. She answered everything without getting defensive. She said she argued with him constantly, and that he slowly isolated her from people who challenged his views. She admitted she was weak back then and afraid of being alone. One thing that stood out was when she said she never told her parents the truth about why they broke up because she was ashamed. She said she carried that shame into her next relationships and tried to pretend that period of her life was just a bad match instead of what it really was. She also said she understands now that staying made her complicit in ways she did not fully grasp at the time. I asked her why she did not tell me sooner or more directly. She said she was scared I would leave immediately and that she wanted me to know who she is now before I knew who she was then. Hearing that hurt in a different way. It made me feel like she took away my ability to decide earlier with all the facts. After that conversation, I took some time away again. I talked to my parents this time. My dad David was quiet for a long time after I explained everything. He said something simple but heavy. He said love should not require you to constantly explain why your existence deserves respect. My mom Susan was more forgiving. She said people can grow, but only if they truly understand the harm they allowed. A few days later, Emily asked if I would be willing to meet her therapist with her for one session. She said she has been in therapy for years, partly because of that relationship, and wanted me to hear from a neutral third party how seriously she has worked on herself. I agreed, partly out of curiosity and partly because I needed closure one way or another. The session was emotional. The therapist did not defend Emily blindly. She acknowledged that staying with someone like that caused real harm, even if Emily was not the one saying the words. She also talked about how Emily came from a background where conflict meant abandonment, and how that fear kept her stuck longer than it should have. It did not excuse it, but it explained it. After that session, something shifted in me. Not relief exactly, but clarity. I realized my biggest fear was not that Emily used to date a racist. It was that I might one day have to convince my partner to stand fully with me if things got hard. Watching how she talked about her past now, without minimizing it, without blaming youth alone, showed me she is not the same person she was at 21. We talked again later that night, and I told her the truth. I told her I am still hurt, and that this will probably never sit perfectly with me. I told her I need to see consistency over time, not just words. I also told her that if I ever feel like I am carrying the burden of educating or defending my humanity in this relationship, I will leave without debate. She accepted that without arguing. She said she understands that this is the cost of rebuilding trust, and that she would rather face it honestly than lose me by pretending it does not matter. For now, we are still together. I am moving slowly, and I am paying attention to how she shows up in uncomfortable situations, not just when things are easy. I do not know if this will work long term, and I am no longer promising myself that it has to. What I do know is that walking away immediately would have left me with unanswered questions, and staying blindly would have left me resentful. This is where things stand. I am choosing to observe actions instead of running from fear or ignoring it. If it ends later, I will know I made the decision with open eyes instead of reacting from pain alone. Update: my girlfriend's past relationship is making me question our future. This will be the final update, because the situation has reached a point where there's nothing left to wait and see. After months of trying to move forward carefully, Emily and I are no longer together. The breakup was calm, mutual in tone, and still one of the hardest conversations I have ever had. After the last update, I really did try to give the relationship space to prove itself. I watched how she acted around friends, coworkers, and family. I paid attention to what she challenged and what she stayed quiet about. To her credit, she did not shy away from difficult conversations. She corrected people when they made ignorant comments. She did not laugh things off. On the surface, she did everything right. The problem was that something inside me never settled. I did not feel angry anymore, but I felt guarded in a way I had never been in a relationship. I realized I was constantly checking for reassurance without meaning to. Every story about her past felt heavier. Every disagreement felt like it carried extra weight, because I was asking myself not just whether we disagreed, but whether we fundamentally saw the world the same way. The moment that clarified things happened at a small family gathering of hers. An older relative made an offhand comment about neighborhoods changing and said something that was clearly racially loaded. Emily shut it down quickly and firmly. Everyone moved on. Later that night, she told me she was proud of herself for speaking up. I told her she should be. But instead of relief, I felt tired, not because she did anything wrong, but because I realized I needed a partner whose values did not require recovery or proof in my own mind. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about how much effort it took me to constantly evaluate whether I felt safe, understood, and aligned. I thought about my dad again and his comment about not having to explain your existence. I realized that even though Emily had grown, the history itself had permanently changed how I experienced the relationship. We talked a few days later. I told her that I did not doubt who she is now, but I could not fully release who she had been with and what that meant to me emotionally. I told her I felt like I was asking myself to override instincts that were there to protect me. I said that staying felt like slowly teaching myself to live with discomfort instead of choosing peace. She cried, but she did not argue. She said she had felt the distance too, and that she could tell I was trying to convince myself instead of feeling sure. She said she did not want to be someone I had to analyze forever. That was the moment I knew we were doing the right thing. The breakup itself was respectful. No accusations, no shouting, just a shared understanding that love is not always enough when the foundation feels cracked. We hugged. We said we were grateful for what we had learned from each other. Then I left. In the week since, I have felt sadness, but also relief. Not relief because she was a bad partner, but relief because I am no longer fighting myself. I do not feel like I am betraying my values or my past. I feel aligned again. I do not hate her. I do not think she is a racist or a villain. I think she made a long, harmful choice when she was younger, and even though she did the work to change, that history mattered in ways neither of us could fully undo. That does not make either of us wrong. It just makes us incompatible. I am sharing this final update because a lot of people said I would either regret staying or regret leaving. The truth is, I regret neither. I stayed long enough to be sure, and I left before resentment turned into bitterness. Sometimes the healthiest ending is not dramatic. It is just honest. Stories number 2. My husband's texts made me ask him to leave our house. I never thought I would be the person writing something like this, but here I am because I cannot talk about this with my family yet, and my friends are too close to it. I am a 34-year-old woman, and my husband is 36, and we have been married for 8 years. We live in Ohio in a quiet suburb, and from the outside our life probably looks boring and stable. We have a mortgage. We both work full-time. We argue about dishes and money and whose turn it is to drive to his parents on Sunday. Nothing dramatic ever happens, and that is why what I found knocked the air out of my chest. Last Friday night, my husband left his phone on the kitchen counter when he went to shower. This was not unusual, and I was not snooping on purpose. A message popped up on the screen while I was wiping down the counter, and I glanced at it without thinking. It was from a name I did not recognize, and it said, "I miss you already," with a heart emoji. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a coworker going through something. Maybe it was a family member saved under a nickname. I stood there, staring at the phone like it might bite me. I know people say never look through your partner's phone, but in that moment, my hands were shaking and my brain was screaming. I unlocked it. I know his passcode because he uses the same one for everything. The messages were right there. Weeks of them. Not just casual chatting, but paragraphs. Good morning texts. Good night texts. Inside jokes. Complaints about me that felt like knives. He talked about how lonely he felt and how I did not understand him anymore. She responded with sympathy and compliments and little flirty comments that crossed a line even if nothing physical had happened yet. The woman was named Rachel, and from what I could tell, she lived in the same city. They met at a conference for his job back in the fall. He told me about the conference at the time, and nothing seemed off then. Now reading those messages, I felt like I was reading a stranger's life. He wrote things to her he had not said to me in years. He told her he felt alive when he talked to her. He joked about how if things were different, maybe they would have met at the right time. My hands were numb, and my ears were ringing. When he came out of the shower, I was sitting at the table with his phone in front of me. He knew instantly something was wrong. I asked him who Rachel was. He froze and then sighed like he was tired instead of panicked. That hurt more than if he had yelled. He said she was just a friend and that I was overreacting. I asked him to read the messages out loud and he refused. That told me everything I needed to know. We argued for hours, not screaming, but the kind of quiet, intense argument where every word feels heavy. He kept insisting it was not cheating because nothing physical happened. I kept saying emotional cheating is still cheating. He said he felt neglected. I said I felt betrayed. He said I never listened. I said he never told me he was unhappy. Around midnight, I told him I needed space and asked him to leave for the weekend. He laughed at first and said I could not kick him out of his own house. Something in me snapped. I told him I could not sleep next to him knowing what I knew, and that if he respected me at all, he would give me space. He packed a bag and went to his brother's place. The house felt enormous and silent after he left. I did not sleep at all. I kept replaying the messages in my head. Some people might think kicking him out was extreme, but in that moment, it felt like the only way I could breathe. Over the weekend, he texted me constantly apologizing and saying he loved me and begging to come home. I did not respond much. I needed to think without his voice in my head. On Sunday, I talked to my sister Emily and told her everything. She was furious on my behalf and said I did the right thing. She reminded me that boundaries matter and that I am allowed to protect my peace. On Monday, I called a lawyer named Mark just to understand my options because I was scared and confused. He explained that asking him to leave temporarily does not mean I am abandoning the house and that legally it was fine as long as it was mutual or not forced. That conversation grounded me more than I expected. When my husband came back on Tuesday to talk face to face, I felt calm in a way that surprised me. I told him I was not ready for him to move back in yet. I told him I needed him to cut contact with Rachel completely and to start counseling if he wanted any chance of fixing this. He cried and agreed to everything. I believe he is sorry, but I also believe sorry does not erase what happened. Trust does not come back just because someone promises it will. Now I am sitting here wondering if I was wrong to kick him out so fast. Part of me feels guilty because he did not physically cheat, and because marriage is supposed to be about working through things. Another part of me feels like if I had not drawn a hard line, he would have minimized it forever. I love my husband. I also love myself, and I am trying to remember that those two things do not have to cancel each other out. Stories number 3. My brother is not the person I thought he was. I am 30, and I always thought my brother was my safe place in this family. He is 36, and growing up, he was the one who walked me to school, scared away bullies, and let me cry in his room when our parents were fighting. His name is Daniel, and for most of my life, I would have trusted him with anything. A few months ago, I moved back to our hometown in Ohio after a bad breakup and losing my job. I was low on money and confidence, so my parents let me stay with them until I got back on my feet. Daniel lives about 20 minutes away with his wife and 2 kids. He started coming over more often to check on me, which I thought was sweet. He would bring food, help fix stuff around the house, and tell me I would be okay. I started dating a guy named Marcus that I met through a temp job. Nothing serious at first, but we clicked fast. He was funny, charming, and made me feel wanted again after feeling invisible for a long time. I told Daniel about him early on because I always tell Daniel everything. Daniel smiled, but his smile felt tight, and he asked a lot of questions. Where did he work? Where did he live? What kind of car did he drive? Was he divorced? Did he have kids? I joked that he sounded like a dad meeting his daughter's prom date. Things with Marcus got serious fast. He stayed over sometimes when my parents were out of town. He talked about moving in together one day. I felt hopeful for the first time in a while. Then little weird things started happening. Marcus would cancel plans suddenly. He would show up late and say he got held up. Sometimes he would seem nervous when his phone buzzed. Once I saw a text pop up from an unknown number that just said, "You promised." When I asked him about it, he said it was work stuff and kissed me to shut me up. One night, I went out with my friend Lauren and had too much to drink, so I asked Marcus to come pick me up. He said he was busy and could not. I ended up calling Daniel because he always answers. He picked me up, and on the drive home, he was quiet. When I asked what was wrong, he said he did not trust Marcus. I asked why, and he said he just had a bad feeling. A week later, Marcus disappeared for 2 days. No calls, no texts. I was sick with worry. I went to his apartment, and his car was gone. I called his job, and they said he had not been there in days. I called Daniel crying, and he came over right away. He hugged me and said Marcus was probably not worth my tears. That night, I could not sleep. I went to the kitchen for water and saw Daniel's phone on the counter because he had left it charging. It buzzed and lit up. I know I should not have looked, but I did. The screen showed a text preview from a number not saved in his phone. It said, "She still doesn't know. We're running out of time." My stomach dropped. I did something I never thought I would do. I unlocked his phone. I knew his code because he never changed it from our childhood house number. I opened the messages. The number was Marcus. I sat there shaking while reading. They had been talking for months, way before I even met Marcus. The messages were about money, about me, about using me. Daniel was in deep debt from gambling. He owed a lot of money to people I had never heard of. Marcus was connected to those people. The plan was for Marcus to date me, gain my trust, and convince me to co-sign a loan or let him use my credit. They talked about how easy I was. Daniel told Marcus what to say to me, what I liked, what made me feel safe. There were messages where Daniel complained about me being too slow, and Marcus said he would push harder. There were jokes about how I would do anything for family. There was one message from Daniel saying once she signs, we're good. I felt like I was going to throw up. My own brother had sold me out, not for love, not for survival, for gambling and bad choices. I took pictures of the messages with my phone and went back to my room. I did not sleep at all. In the morning, I told my parents I was sick and stayed in bed. Daniel left early. I texted Marcus and told him I knew everything. He did not reply for hours. When he finally did, he said Daniel forced him into it. He said he felt bad. He said he really liked me now. I told him to never contact me again. Then I called Daniel. I asked him straight up if he used me. There was a long silence. Then he said he was sorry. He said he was desperate. He said he never meant for it to go this far. He said I was strong and would recover, but he would not if those people hurt him. I screamed at him. I told him he was dead to me. He cried and said I was overreacting. That part hurt almost more than the betrayal. He really thought this was something I should just get over. I showed my parents the screenshots. My mom cried so hard she could not breathe. My dad looked like he aged 10 years in 1 minute. They confronted Daniel. He admitted everything. He said he would pay me back for the emotional damage by being better. My dad told him to leave and not come back until he had fixed his life. Now, my family is broken. Holidays are quiet. My mom keeps trying to make me forgive him. She says he is still my brother. My dad is angry, but tired. Daniel keeps texting me long apologies. Sometimes he sends pictures of us as kids and says, remember this. I remember. That is the problem. I remember the boy who protected me. I remember the man who taught me to drive. I remember trusting him with my whole heart. And now when I think of him, I see the messages where he called me easy. I hear his voice telling Marcus how to lie to me. I feel stupid for ever thinking he would never hurt me. I don't know if I should cut him off forever or if that makes me heartless. I don't know how to sit in the same room as him again without shaking. I don't know how to explain to my parents that the brother they raised is gone to me. All I know is that the person who broke my heart the worst was not my boyfriend. It was my brother. Update. My brother is not the person I thought he was. It has been a little over 6 weeks since everything blew up, and my life still feels like it is moving in slow motion. I wake up every day, and for a few seconds, I forget what happened. Then it hits me again like a wave, and I feel sick all over. After my parents kicked Daniel out, he stayed with a friend for a while, and then with his wife's sister. His wife, Emily, called me crying about a week after everything came out. She said she had just found out the full truth and that Daniel had lied to her about a lot more than just me. He had drained savings accounts, taken out secret credit cards, and even borrowed money in her name without telling her. She said she felt like she married a stranger. I did not know what to say. I felt bad for her, but I was also angry because part of me thought she should have known something was wrong. Emily told me Marcus had also reached out to her, trying to make himself look like the victim. He told her Daniel manipulated him and that he never meant to hurt me. Emily said she told him to never contact her again and that she saved every message in case she needed them later. A few days later, Marcus showed up at my parents' house. I was in the living room with my mom when we heard knocking. My mom opened the door and he was standing there like nothing had happened. He said he just wanted to talk to me and clear the air. My dad came from the kitchen and told him to leave. Marcus said he deserved a chance to explain. I lost it. I screamed at him to get off our property and that if he ever came back, I would call the police. He looked shocked, like he really believed he could just fix it with words. He left, but I watched from the window until his car was gone, because I did not trust him at all. That night, I could not stop shaking. I kept thinking about how close I came to ruining my life because I trusted the wrong people. I decided to pull my credit report just to be safe. I found 2 hard inquiries I did not recognize from around the time Marcus started pushing the idea of building a future together. Nothing had gone through, but seeing that made me feel even more terrified. I froze my credit the next morning. My dad helped me file a police report. I did not know if anything would come from it, but he said it was better to have a record. I brought the screenshots of the messages between Daniel and Marcus. The officer took everything seriously and said there might be enough to investigate for fraud conspiracy or attempted fraud. Hearing those words made it real in a way I was not ready for. This was not just family drama. This was criminal. When Daniel found out I went to the police, he lost it. He sent me dozens of messages in one night. He said I was ruining his life. He said I was choosing strangers over my own blood. He said if he went to jail, it would be my fault. I blocked his number. I blocked him on everything. It hurt more than I can explain, but I could not keep letting him twist things around. My mom is struggling the most. She keeps saying she failed as a mother. She cries about Daniel and cries about me and says she does not know how to fix this. I keep telling her this is not her fault, but I know she does not believe me. My dad is quieter than usual. He spends a lot of time in the garage just sitting and staring at nothing. Emily came over one afternoon when Daniel was not around. She looked exhausted. She told me she is planning to leave him. She said she cannot trust him anymore and that she is scared of what he might do next. She asked me if I would testify or give statements if it came to that. I told her yes. Saying that out loud felt strange, like I was talking about someone who was not really my brother. Emily said Daniel keeps saying he did it all for his family, that he just wanted to fix his mistakes. She said he cries and says he loves me. Hearing that made me angry. Love does not look like using someone and calling them easy. A week after that, I got a call from the police asking me to come in and answer more questions. They said Marcus had been arrested on an unrelated charge and that during questioning, my case came up. They did not tell me details, but they said things were moving forward. I sat in my car afterward and cried for a long time. Not because I felt bad for Marcus, but because everything felt so heavy and final. I also started therapy. I did not realize how much this messed with my head until I tried to talk about it out loud. I keep blaming myself for not seeing the signs. My therapist keeps telling me that trust is not a flaw. She says the fault belongs to the people who abused it. Some days I believe her, some days I do not. I still live with my parents, but I am saving to move out again. I found a steady job at a small office. It is not my dream job, but it feels good to have something that is just mine. My coworkers do not know my story. At work, I am just another person, not the girl whose brother tried to ruin her life. Daniel has tried reaching out through other people. He asked our cousin Tyler to talk to me for him. Tyler said Daniel is not himself and that addiction changes people. I told Tyler that might be true, but it does not erase what he did. Tyler said family should forgive. I said family should not destroy each other in the first place. I think about forgiveness a lot. People act like it is something you owe others. Right now, it feels like something I might owe myself one day. But I am not there yet. Some wounds are not ready to close. Sometimes I look at old photos of me and Daniel as kids. I do not feel love when I see them anymore. I feel grief. I feel like someone died, even though he is still alive. I miss the brother I thought I had. I do not miss the man he is now. I do not know what will happen legally. I do not know what will happen to my family. I just know that I am done sacrificing myself to keep other people comfortable. I am choosing myself, even if that means walking away from someone who shares my blood. Stories number 4. My partner doesn't know I'm planning to leave after his father dies. I never thought I would be the kind of person who planned an exit around a death, but here I am, writing this because the guilt is eating me alive, and I don't know who else I can say this to. I'm a 32-year-old woman living in the Midwest, and I've been with my partner for almost 6 years. I'll call him Daniel. We're not married, but we live together, share bills, have a dog, the whole almost married setup. From the outside, people think we're solid, stable, comfortable. The kind of couple that will probably get engaged eventually once life slows down a little. The problem is that life never slowed down, it just got heavier. Daniel's father, Richard, has been sick for the entire time I've known Daniel. At first it was manageable, then it was hospital visits, then it was home care, now it's hospice. His dad is dying, and everyone knows it, even if no one says the words out loud. Daniel is an only child. His mom passed away years before we met. So when Richard's health started declining fast, Daniel became everything. Son, caregiver, decision maker, emotional support. I understood that. I supported that. I stepped into that world willingly. What I didn't understand at the time was that I would slowly disappear from my own life. For the past 3 years, our relationship has revolved almost entirely around his father's illness. Every holiday is at the house because Richard can't travel. Every weekend is planned around his needs. Every conversation somehow circles back to medical updates, insurance fights, medication schedules, and Daniel's stress. I tried to be patient. I tried to be the strong partner. I cooked meals. I cleaned. I sat quietly in waiting rooms. I learned medical terms I never wanted to know. I held Daniel while he cried and told him it was okay to feel angry and exhausted. But somewhere along the way, Daniel stopped seeing me as a partner and started seeing me as a supporting character in his crisis. We don't go on dates anymore. We don't talk about our future. Anytime I bring up marriage, kids, moving, even a vacation, he shuts down or gets defensive. He says he can't think about that right now, that his dad is dying, that I'm being selfish for wanting more when he's dealing with this. I started to feel like I was on pause while his life moved forward in slow motion grief. About a year ago, something inside me broke a little. I realized that even after his father passes, Daniel is not going to magically become the man I've been waiting for. This situation didn't create his emotional avoidance, it just exposed it. He doesn't communicate. He doesn't make space for my needs. He doesn't see me unless I'm actively making his life easier. I tried talking to him multiple times. I told him I felt lonely even when we were in the same room. I told him I missed feeling like his partner instead of his assistant. He apologized. He cried. He promised things would get better after everything with his dad was over. After everything with his dad is over has become the phrase that traps me. Because what am I supposed to do? Leave while his father is actively dying. Be the woman who abandons her partner at the worst moment of his life. I know how that would look. I know how that would feel. I know I would never forgive myself for that. So I made a quiet decision I haven't said out loud to anyone. I'm going to leave after his father dies. I hate even typing that sentence. It makes me feel calculated and cruel. But I also feel like I'm drowning, and this is the only way I can breathe without destroying him in the process. I've started emotionally detaching, not in a dramatic way, just small things. I stopped initiating conversations about the future. I stopped fighting to be heard. I stopped rearranging my entire schedule automatically. I still help. I still show up. But there's a part of me that has already left. Sometimes I look at Daniel and feel overwhelming sadness instead of love. Not because I don't care about him, but because I know this is ending and he doesn't. He still talks about us eventually taking a trip, eventually renovating the house, eventually getting married. All of it wrapped in that same word, eventually. I feel like I'm lying to him every day by staying, like I'm stealing time from him that he could be using to process his grief honestly instead of believing I'll still be here on the other side. At the same time, I feel trapped by timing. If I leave now, I become the villain in everyone's story, his friends, his extended family, even my own conscience. If I wait, I'm accused of using his grief as a convenient exit. I don't know if there's a morally clean way out of this. The worst part is that I don't think Daniel has the emotional capacity to support me, even if his father wasn't sick. I think I ignored that for years because the crisis gave him an excuse. Now, I can't unsee it. I'm terrified of the moment after the funeral, when the casseroles stop coming, when people go back to their lives, when he turns to me, expecting me to fill the space his father leaves behind, and I don't have it in me anymore. I don't plan to leave immediately after the death. I'm not heartless. I plan to wait a respectful amount of time, help with arrangements, let the dust settle. Then I'll tell him I can't do this anymore, that I've been unhappy for a long time, that I need to choose myself. Even writing that makes my chest hurt. I don't know if staying makes me compassionate or cowardly. I don't know if leaving later makes me patient or manipulative. I just know that I can't keep living in this half-life where my needs don't matter and my future is indefinitely postponed. I love Daniel, but love isn't enough anymore, and it hasn't been for a while. I wish his father wasn't dying. I wish the timing wasn't so cruel. I wish I had left earlier before everything got this heavy. I'm stuck between being someone I don't want to be, no matter what I choose. I don't know what I should do. Update, my partner doesn't know I'm planning to leave after his father dies. I didn't expect to be back here writing this, but everything happened faster and messier than I thought it would, and I feel like I'm coming apart at the seams. Richard passed away 5 weeks ago. It was late at night when Daniel got the call from the hospice nurse. I was sitting next to him on the couch when his phone rang, and I knew before he even answered. His whole body went stiff, and then he just collapsed into me like all the air had been sucked out of him. I held him while he cried, in this deep, broken way I had never heard before. It felt raw and primal, and I won't ever forget that sound. The days that followed were a blur. Family flew in. Old friends showed up. The house filled with people and food and stories about Richard. I helped coordinate everything. I made calls. I cleaned. I stood next to Daniel at the funeral home and watched him shake as he chose a casket. I slept maybe 3 hours a night. At the funeral, I sat in the front row with him. Everyone assumed I was basically his wife at this point. People squeezed my hands and told me how lucky Daniel was to have me. His aunt hugged me and said she didn't know how he would have survived this without me. Every time someone said that, something twisted in my stomach. After the funeral there was this strange calm. The chaos stopped. People went home. The casserole slowed down. And suddenly, it was just us again in the quiet house. Except now, there was a giant absence where his father had been. This is the part I thought I was preparing myself for. I told myself I would be strong, that I would give him time, that I wouldn't rush him or make it about me. But what I didn't expect was how quickly Daniel latched onto me emotionally. He barely leaves my side now. If I go to the grocery store, he asks when I'll be back. If I work late, he texts constantly. He sleeps wrapped around me like he's afraid I'll disappear if he lets go. At night, he talks about his dad over and over, replaying the last days, the what-ifs, the guilt. I listen. I reassure. I comfort. And inside, I feel myself shutting down. I feel horrible admitting this, but I don't have anything left to give. I gave everything for years while his father was alive. I told myself once Richard passed, things would change. In a way they did, just not how Daniel promised. Now all the emotional weight he used to spread between me and his father is entirely on me. 2 weeks ago, he said something that made my chest go cold. We were lying in bed and he said, almost casually, that he doesn't know what he would do without me now, that I'm all he has left, that he can't imagine his life without me in it. He said it like it was comforting, like it was love. All I felt was panic. I realized in that moment that if I stay, I will disappear completely. I will become his lifeline instead of his partner. His grief will define our relationship, and there will never be room for me again. I started pulling away without meaning to. Small things. Shorter answers. Less physical affection. I told myself it was just exhaustion. He noticed immediately. A few nights ago, he finally asked me what was wrong. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and he looked so tired and hollow that for a second I almost swallowed everything and decided to stay forever just so he wouldn't hurt anymore. But then he said he felt like I was already halfway gone. And I broke. I didn't tell him everything. I couldn't. But I told him I've been unhappy for a long time. That this didn't start with his father's death. That I feel lost and burned out and like I don't recognize myself anymore. He stared at me like I was speaking another language. He said he thought we were going to start our life now. That now that the worst was over, we could finally focus on us. He said he needed me more than ever and didn't understand why I was doing this now of all times. I didn't have a good answer that didn't sound cruel. I told him I wasn't leaving right this second, but that I needed space to think, that I couldn't promise anything. He cried again, but this time it was quieter, defeated. He asked if I had already decided. I didn't answer. Since that conversation, the house feels tense and fragile. He's trying so hard. He's affectionate. He tells me he loves me constantly. He talks about therapy, about proposing someday soon, about how we can get through this together. Every word feels like another weight on my chest. I feel like the worst person alive because I know I'm still planning to leave. Not tomorrow, not next week, but soon. And every kind thing he does just makes me feel more like a fraud. I've started looking at apartments. I haven't signed anything, but I have tabs open on my phone that I hide from him. I've started putting money aside quietly. I hate myself for how sneaky it feels, but I also know that if I don't prepare, I'll lose my nerve completely. I keep replaying the same question in my head. Is there ever a right time to leave someone you love when they're grieving? I don't think there is. But I also don't think sacrificing my entire future to avoid being the bad guy is the right answer either. I still care about Daniel deeply. I don't regret supporting him through his father's illness. I would do that part again. What I regret is not being honest with myself sooner about what it was costing me. I don't know how this will end yet. I just know that staying out of guilt is starting to feel just as cruel as leaving. I'm scared, I'm sad, and I feel completely alone even when he's sitting right next to me. That's where things stand now. Stories number 5. My wife doesn't want me to give money to my sister, and I feel like I'm being torn in half by the people I love most. I am a 38-year-old guy living in Ohio, and I have been married to my wife Lauren for 9 years. We met in our 20s when life felt simpler and problems felt smaller. We have 2 kids together, a 7-year-old boy named Caleb and a 4-year-old girl named Nora. On the outside, our life looks stable and even enviable to some people. We both work full-time and we own a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. I work in logistics management for a regional distributor, and Lauren works as a dental hygienist at a busy practice. We are not rich, but we are careful and organized. We pay our bills on time, keep an emergency fund, and try to be intentional about saving for our kids' future. Money has always been something we talk about and usually agree on. We are not identical in how we view it, but we respect each other's concerns. Lauren is more cautious and anxious about financial security, and I tend to be more flexible, especially when it comes to family. Until now, that difference never caused a real fight. This situation did. My sister Emily is 34, and she lives in Indiana, about 3 hours away. She is a single mom to a 10-year-old girl named Sophie, who is bright, sensitive, and deeply attached to her mom. Emily has had a rough few years, and honestly, a rough adulthood overall. She married her high school boyfriend Jake when she was 22. He was charming and fun at first, but unreliable even then. After Sophie was born, things got worse. He bounced between jobs, drank too much, and cheated on her more than once. Eventually, he left when Sophie was 3 and moved across the state. He pays child support sporadically when he feels like it, and there's always an excuse when he does not. Since then, Emily has worked nonstop just to keep her head above water. She waitressed nights while Sophie slept at our mom's house. Then she did retail during the day and waited tables on weekends. She eventually got certified as a medical assistant, which felt like a turning point. She finally had benefits and predictable hours. Then last year, she was in a car accident when someone ran a red light. She was not permanently disabled, but her back has never been the same. She can still work, but not long shifts and not overtime. She burns through sick days fast, and her income dropped enough that she is constantly juggling bills. Growing up, it was just me and Emily. Our dad died suddenly from a heart attack when I was 16 and she was 12. Our mom was devastated, but had no choice but to keep going. She worked double shifts as a nurse and came home exhausted. I stepped up a lot more than most older brothers. I helped Emily with homework, cooked simple dinners, and made sure she got to school activities. I took a part-time job as soon as I could and helped with groceries and utilities. That sense of responsibility never really left me. Even after I got married and started my own family, I still felt like part of my job was to look out for my sister. About 2 months ago, Emily called me late at night. I could hear the panic in her voice before she even said anything. She told me she had fallen behind on rent because her hours were cut again after she missed work due to back pain. Her landlord gave her a pay or quit notice. She needed $3,000 to catch up and avoid eviction. She said she had already asked our mom, who is retired now and living on a fixed income, and there was no way she could help. Emily told me she tried applying for a personal loan, but her credit was bad from years of juggling bills. She kept apologizing for calling me and said she understood if I could not help. I told her I would talk to Lauren and see what we could do. I did not promise anything, but I also did not say no. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time thinking about Sophie and how she already had so much instability in her life. I thought about my own kids sleeping safely down the hall and how different their childhood is. When I brought it up to my wife the next day, it did not go how I expected. We were sitting at the kitchen table after the kids went to bed. I explained Emily's situation and the amount she needed. Lauren immediately tensed up and I could see the walls go up. She said she was not comfortable giving that much money away. I tried to explain it was not just giving it away, it was helping my sister avoid losing her home. Lauren said we worked hard for our savings and that money was supposed to be for emergencies or our kids' future. She asked if Emily would pay us back, and I honestly said I did not know. That honesty seemed to frustrate her more. She said she does not like open-ended financial help with no clear repayment. She reminded me that 2 years ago, we gave Emily $1,000 when her car broke down and she never fully paid it back. I admitted that was true, but pointed out Emily did send us money when she could, even if it did not cover everything. Lauren said that still did not make it okay and that we cannot keep absorbing other people's problems. The conversation turned into an argument faster than I expected. Lauren said Emily always has some crisis and that we are not her safety net. I said life has not exactly been fair to her. Lauren said life is not fair to anyone and that we still have to draw boundaries. I felt defensive and said that if Lauren were in Emily's shoes, I would help her without hesitation. Lauren snapped back that her family would never put us in that position because they plan better. That comment hurt more than I expected because it felt like she was calling my sister irresponsible or inferior. I said some things I regret, including that I would help Emily even if Lauren did not agree because she is my sister. That did not end the argument. Lauren said if I went behind her back, it would seriously damage our marriage. She said she needs to trust that we make big financial decisions together. For the next week, the house was tense. We were polite, but distant. We talked about schedules and the kids, but nothing deeper. I could feel the unspoken issue hanging between us. During that week, Emily texted me updates that made my stomach drop. The landlord was firm. She had tried selling some things and picking up extra shifts, but it was not enough. She said Sophie was asking why they might have to move, and she did not know what to tell her. I did not share all of this with Lauren because I did not want to pressure her, but it ate at me. I ran the numbers constantly. We had about $20,000 in savings. $3,000 would hurt, but it would not ruin us. It would slow down our progress on the kids' college fund and push back a few home projects. I tried to compromise by suggesting we loan Emily the money with a written agreement and a payment plan. Lauren said paperwork would not magically make Emily able to pay and that it would just add resentment later. She said she does not want to mix money and family more than we already have. Then, Lauren brought up something I had not considered. She said helping Emily now might mean we are setting a precedent that we will always step in. What if next time it is $5,000 or $10,000? What if one of us loses our job? Or one of the kids has a medical emergency? She said she already feels anxious about money, and this made her feel unsafe. Hearing that made me pause, because I never want my wife to feel insecure in our marriage or our future. I called my mom to get her perspective, and she surprised me by siding more with Lauren than with me. She said as much as she loves Emily, she worries that bailing her out prevents her from finding more stable solutions. She reminded me that Emily has always survived somehow. She suggested helping in non-cash ways, like watching Sophie so Emily could work more, or helping her apply for assistance programs. I told her eviction felt like an immediate crisis. My mom said sometimes there are no perfect solutions, only less bad ones. A few days later, Emily texted me again, saying the landlord gave her until the end of the week. She did not ask directly for the money, but the message was clear. I felt sick reading it. That night, Lauren and I talked again. I told her I was struggling because this felt like choosing between my wife and my sister. Lauren said she is not asking me to abandon my sister, but she needs to protect our family first. She said if I give the money against her wishes, it will damage our trust in a way she is not sure we could easily fix. I lay awake most of that night, listening to Lauren breathe next to me. I replayed my childhood and how families stuck together when things were bad. I remembered my mom crying at the kitchen table after my dad died, and how neighbors and relatives helped us get through. I also thought about my marriage vows and how Lauren and the kids are my primary family now. I do not want to resent my wife for not helping, and I do not want Emily or Sophie to resent me for not stepping up. Since this started, I have found myself distracted at work and short-tempered in ways I do not like. I will be in a meeting and suddenly picture Emily sitting at her small kitchen table, staring at bills spread out in front of her. I picture Sophie trying to act brave while packing her backpack. Those images make it hard to focus. At the same time, I will look at pictures of Caleb and Nora on my phone and feel a different kind of fear. What if something happened to them and we needed that money? What kind of father risks his own kids' security? Lauren has tried to explain her side calmly since the initial blow-up. She told me growing up, her parents lost their house during the recession and she still carries that trauma. She remembers the panic of moving and the fights about money. She said seeing our savings drop triggers that fear even if logically she knows we will be okay. Hearing that helped me understand her reaction better, but it did not solve the problem. Emily called me yesterday afternoon while I was driving home. She asked how things were going, and I could hear her trying not to sound desperate. She told me she was looking into shelters as a backup, and that broke me. I told her I was still talking to Lauren and that I wished I had an answer. She said she understood, but I could hear the disappointment anyway. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time before going inside. I do not want to be the reason my sister and niece end up homeless. I also do not want to be the reason my marriage cracks. I keep hoping there is some obvious solution I am missing, but so far there is not. I feel like whatever choice I make will follow me for a long time. Update. My wife doesn't want me to give money to my sister, and I feel like I'm being torn in half by the people I love most. A lot has happened since I first wrote this, and I honestly did not expect things to escalate the way they did. The night after I posted my original story, I could barely sleep. I kept replaying every comment Lauren and I had made to each other and every text from Emily. I felt stuck in the middle and completely exhausted by it. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing that day was likely the deadline Emily had mentioned. Before work, Lauren and I had another quiet conversation. Not an argument this time, but not warm either. She asked me if I had made a decision. I told her I still did not know and that I felt paralyzed. She said she needed clarity because living in limbo was making her anxious. She repeated that she was not trying to be cruel, but she could not support giving Emily $3,000 outright. She said if I did it anyway, she would feel betrayed. Hearing that word made my chest tighten. Betrayal feels heavy and permanent. I went to work, but barely got anything done. Around lunch, I got a call from Emily. She was crying. She told me the landlord had already started the eviction filing because she missed the final cutoff by 1 day. She said she had tried to negotiate and even offered to move out willingly to avoid court, but he refused. She was panicking about how an eviction would destroy her chances of renting anywhere else. She kept apologizing and saying she never meant to cause problems in my marriage. I could hear Sophie in the background asking what was wrong, and that sound honestly broke something in me. I left work early and drove around aimlessly for almost an hour. I knew if I went home, I would either explode or shut down. I called my mom again and told her the eviction process had started. She sounded tired and sad. She said she wished she had money to help, but she did not. She repeated that she trusted me to do what I thought was right, but reminded me again that my marriage mattered. That did not make the decision any easier. When I finally went home, Lauren could tell something was wrong immediately. I told her about the eviction filing and that Emily was crying and scared. Lauren listened quietly and then said something that surprised me. She said she was willing to consider a compromise, but it had to protect our family first. She suggested we not give Emily the money directly, but instead pay part of the rent directly to the landlord and only a portion of what was owed. She said she was willing to help with $1,500 one time, with no promises beyond that. She said it was all she could handle emotionally and financially. I was relieved she was willing to meet me halfway, but also terrified that it would not be enough. Emily needed $3,000, and I knew partial help might still leave her evicted. I asked Lauren if we could stretch to $2,000. She shook her head and said she could not. She was already pushing past what felt safe to her. I could see how hard this was for her, and I appreciated that she was even trying. That night, I called Emily and explained the situation honestly. I told her Lauren and I could help with $1,500 directly to the landlord, but that was it. Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she said she was grateful for anything and that she did not want to cause more stress. She said she would try to figure out the rest. I offered to help her make calls and look for assistance programs the next day. She agreed, but I could tell she was defeated. We sent the money the next morning. Lauren insisted on being there when I did it, and I understood why. It felt strange, intense, but also like a small relief that something concrete was happening. That afternoon, Emily told me the landlord accepted the payment, but said the eviction process would continue unless the remaining balance was paid within 5 days. So, we had bought her some time, but not solved the problem. Over the next few days, I threw myself into trying to help Emily in every non-financial way I could. I spent hours on the phone with her, calling local charities, housing assistance programs, and legal aid. Some places had wait lists. Some said she made too much money even with reduced hours. One legal aid lawyer explained that once eviction proceedings start, landlords often refuse partial payments, and that scared me even more. Emily tried picking up extra shifts, but her back flared up and she had to leave early one night. Lauren watched all of this from a distance. She did not interfere, but she also did not get deeply involved. I could tell she was emotionally protecting herself. One night, she told me she felt awful for Emily, but also resentful that our life was being consumed by this crisis. She said she felt guilty for feeling that way, which made her feel even worse. I reassured her that her feelings made sense, but inside I felt stretched thin. 2 days before the deadline, Emily called me again. She said she had talked to a coworker who mentioned a cousin with a spare room. It was not ideal and it was in a different school district, but it was something. She would have to move quickly and put most of her things in storage. She said Sophie was upset about changing schools, but understood they might not have a choice. Hearing that was painful, but also a strange relief because at least they would not be on the street. The night before everything was supposed to come to a head, Lauren and I had a long conversation after the kids went to bed. It was the most honest talk we have had in a while. I told her I still felt like I failed my sister. Lauren told me she felt like she failed me by not being able to give more. We both admitted we were carrying resentment we did not want. She told me she was scared that if we did not get on the same page about family boundaries, this would keep happening in different forms. I told her I was scared of becoming someone who turns his back on family. We both cried, which does not happen often for either of us. The next day, Emily confirmed she would move in with the coworker temporarily, and that she would leave the apartment before the eviction finalized. She said it was humiliating, but better than having an eviction on her record. I offered to drive down and help her move, and Lauren agreed. We spent the weekend hauling boxes and furniture into a small rented storage unit. Sophie was quiet most of the time, but hugged me hard when I left. That hug is something I will not forget. Since then, things have been calmer, but also different. Emily is safe for now, but her situation is still unstable. She is looking for a cheaper place and exploring disability accommodations at work. Lauren and I are trying to reconnect and rebuild some emotional closeness. We agreed to start couples counseling because we both realized this conflict touched deeper fears and values we never fully talked through. Money, family, loyalty, and security are all tangled up for us in ways we did not expect. I still feel conflicted. Part of me wonders if I should have pushed harder or found a way to give more. Another part of me knows that blowing up my marriage would not actually help Emily in the long run. I do not feel like there was a clean win here. It feels more like damage control on all sides. What I do know is that this situation changed how I see responsibility and limits. I love my sister, and I always will. I also love my wife and kids, and they are my daily reality. Balancing those loves is harder than I ever imagined. Right now, I am trying to sit with the discomfort instead of pretending it is resolved. I am hoping time and honest conversations will soften the edges of this, and that someday this will feel like a hard chapter we survived rather than a crack that never fully healed. Stories number 6. My girlfriend revealed her sexual past, and now I don't know where I stand. I am a 23-year-old guy, and I have been dating my girlfriend Hannah for a little over 6 months. She is 20. We met through a coworker at a casual get-together, and things moved pretty naturally from there. Nothing rushed, nothing dramatic. We spent a lot of time talking, going on simple dates, watching movies, cooking together, and slowly building what felt like a solid, emotional connection. From the beginning, Hannah came across as kind, affectionate, and very open emotionally. She was the one who pushed for honesty early on. She talked about her family issues, past struggles with anxiety, and how she wanted something serious, even though she is still young. That mattered to me because I am not into casual dating anymore. I want stability and trust, not chaos. Up until recently, I felt like we were aligned. We had good communication, healthy boundaries, and what I thought was a shared pace when it came to intimacy. I am not inexperienced, but I have always viewed sex as something that is closely tied to emotional connection. I assumed she felt the same way because that is how she acted with me. About 2 weeks ago, we were having a late-night conversation at her apartment. It started out light and then drifted into deeper territory. She asked me if I ever judge people for their past. I answered honestly and said I try not to, but context matters. That is when she got quiet. I could tell something was coming. She told me she wanted to be fully transparent before things got more serious between us. Then she told me about her sexual past. I will not go into explicit detail, but it was far heavier than I expected, especially given her age. She talked about a lot of partners in a short time span, situations that involved very little emotional connection, and choices she admitted were driven by validation and self-worth issues. I felt like the ground shifted under me. I stayed calm and listened because I knew this was not easy for her to share. She was not bragging. She was emotional and clearly vulnerable. She said she is not proud of that period of her life and that it happened before we met. She said she has been trying to change how she views herself and relationships. I told her I appreciated her honesty and that I needed time to process. She understood and did not pressure me to react a certain way, but internally, I was conflicted in a way I did not expect. I was not angry and I was not disgusted. I was confused and unsettled. Since that night, I have been questioning things I thought I understood about our relationship. I keep wondering if the version of intimacy I feel with her means the same thing to her as it does to me. I find myself replaying moments and asking whether I was projecting my values onto her instead of actually knowing hers. Part of me feels guilty for even struggling with this. I know people say the past is the past and that no one is owed an explanation. I agree with that in theory. But emotions are not theories. They are reactions. And my reaction has been a mix of insecurity, doubt, and fear of incompatibility. I also cannot ignore the age difference in life experience. She is only 20 and has lived a very intense few years. I worry that she might still be figuring herself out in ways that could affect us down the line. I worry that what she wants now might change quickly. I worry that I am signing up for emotional instability without meaning to. I talked to my friend Jason about it. He told me I am allowed to have preferences and boundaries, and that being uncomfortable does not automatically make me judgmental. He said compatibility includes how people view intimacy, not just whether they care about each other. I also talked to my sister Megan. She was more critical of me. She said Hannah trusted me with something deeply personal, and that I need to be careful not to punish her for being honest. She asked me whether my discomfort is about values or about ego. That question hit harder than I expected. Hannah has noticed a shift in me. She asked me directly if I see her differently now. I did not know how to answer without hurting her. I told her I am still processing and that I care about her, but I need to be honest with myself too. She said she understands, but is scared that her past will always be a shadow in our relationship. That is exactly what I am afraid of. I do not want to become someone who silently resents or judges the person he is with. At the same time, I do not want to ignore my instincts just to avoid being seen as unfair. I keep going back and forth between compassion for her growth and concern for my own emotional well-being. Right now, I am stuck between staying and trying to work through this or stepping away before things get deeper and more painful for both of us. I care about her, but I do not know if caring is enough when core views on intimacy feel misaligned. Update. My girlfriend revealed her sexual past, and now I don't know where I stand. It has been about a month since I first wrote this, and I wanted to give an update because things did not stay frozen the way they were when I posted. A lot of conversations happened, some planned and some that came out of nowhere, and I learned more about myself than I expected to. After the initial shock wore off, Hannah and I agreed that avoiding the topic was only making things worse. We set aside a weekend afternoon to talk without distractions. No phones, no rushing, no trying to soften things to protect each other. I told her up front that I was not trying to shame her or make her defend herself. I just needed to understand whether we were actually compatible or just emotionally attached. She opened up more about that phase of her life. She talked about how lonely she felt after leaving home early, how she tied her value to attention, and how saying yes felt easier than sitting with insecurity. She was very clear that it was not something she wanted anymore, and that being with me felt different because it was slower and safer. I could tell she was being honest, not rehearsed, not trying to sell me a version of herself. I shared my side too. I told her that my struggle was not about numbers or judgment, but about how I attach meaning to intimacy. I told her I was afraid that what felt deep and unique to me might feel replaceable to her, even if that was not true now. Saying that out loud made me feel exposed, but it also made the conversation real instead of theoretical. She did not get defensive. She said she understood why I would feel that way and admitted that in the past, intimacy had been disconnected from emotion for her. She also said that part of growing for her has been learning that connection actually matters more than attention. That mattered to hear, but it did not instantly fix how I felt. Over the next few weeks, we tried to move forward normally, but with more awareness. Some days felt completely fine. Other days I caught myself pulling back emotionally for no clear reason. I realized I was constantly checking my feelings, asking whether I was forcing acceptance or slowly finding peace. That mental loop was exhausting. One night we had a small argument that had nothing to do with her past. It was about plans and miscommunication. But the way I shut down surprised both of us. Afterward, I realized I was guarding myself more than I wanted to admit. Not because of anything she did in the present, but because I was afraid of being hurt later. I talked to Jason again, and he pointed out something important. He said even if Hannah has changed, that does not automatically mean I can change how I feel. Wanting different things does not make either person wrong. That stuck with me. A few days later, Hannah asked me directly if I saw a future with her or if I was just trying not to be the bad guy. That question forced honesty. I told her I cared deeply about her, but I am still unsure whether this is something I can fully move past without it resurfacing in moments of stress or insecurity. She was quiet for a long time and then said she appreciated the honesty even though it hurt. She said she would rather know now than build something on uncertainty. We both cried. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because sometimes caring is not enough to create alignment. As of now, we have decided to take a step back instead of fully breaking up. We are giving each other space to think without the pressure of daily closeness. I do not know what the final outcome will be yet. What I do know is that pretending everything was fine would have been unfair to both of us. This situation has taught me that accepting someone's past and being emotionally at peace with it are not always the same thing. I am trying to be honest without being cruel, and kind without lying to myself. Wherever this ends, I want it to end with respect instead of resentment. Update. My girlfriend revealed her sexual past, and now I don't know where I stand. It has been another several weeks since the last update, and things finally reached a point where a decision had to be made. The space Hannah and I agreed to take did exactly what it was supposed to do. It removed the constant emotional noise and forced both of us to sit with our own thoughts instead of feeding off each other's anxiety. At first, we still texted occasionally, checking in, sharing small updates about our days. Over time, those messages became less frequent. Not out of anger, but because the distance made things clearer. I noticed that when we were not talking, I felt calmer. Not happier, not relieved, just calmer. That was something I could not ignore. After about 3 weeks, we met in person to talk. We chose a neutral place, a quiet park near her apartment. There was no tension when we saw each other, just a kind of sadness mixed with familiarity. We sat on a bench and talked for a long time. Hannah told me she had been doing a lot of thinking too. She said the space made her realize how much she still ties her worth to whether someone chooses her, and that my hesitation reopened insecurities she thought she had already worked through. She said she does not blame me for that, but she also does not want to feel like she has to keep proving that she is no longer the person she used to be. I told her something I had been afraid to admit before. I said that while I respect her honesty and believe she has grown, I do not think I am emotionally equipped to fully let go of the disconnect I feel around intimacy. I said I could probably stay, but staying would mean constantly managing my feelings instead of trusting them. That did not feel fair to either of us. She asked me if this meant I saw her as damaged or less than. That question hurt to hear. I told her, no, absolutely not. I told her I see her as someone who went through a lot very young and survived the only way she knew how at the time. But I also told her that understanding does not always translate into compatibility. There was a long pause after that. Then she nodded and said she had been feeling the same truth, but was scared to say it first. She said she wants to be with someone who does not have to talk themselves into staying. She said she deserves that, and so do I. We decided to end the relationship fully. There was no dramatic moment, no anger, no accusations. We hugged. We cried a little. Then we said goodbye. In the days after, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. I missed her presence, her laugh, the comfort of having someone. But I also felt lighter. The constant internal debate was gone. I was not analyzing my reactions or questioning my values anymore. Looking back, I do not regret staying long enough to be sure. I also do not regret leaving when I realized certainty was not coming. This experience taught me that accepting someone's past is not just a moral stance, it is an emotional reality. You either find peace with it, or you slowly erode yourself trying to. Hannah and I did not fail each other. We were just at different places, carrying different histories, and needing different kinds of reassurance. I wish her healing and happiness, and I am taking this as a lesson to be honest with myself earlier, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Stories number 7. My daughter's phone contact joke about her dad blew up our family. I am a 41-year-old mother, and I honestly did not think something this small would turn into such a huge fight in our house. I have been married to my husband for 13 years, and we have 2 kids together. Our oldest is our daughter, who is 15, and our youngest is our son, who is 10. We live in the Midwest, in a pretty normal American town where everyone knows everyone, and gossip travels fast even when it should not. Last week, my husband asked to use our daughter's phone to call his because he could not find it. She handed it over without thinking. He opened her contacts and immediately went quiet. I was in the kitchen making dinner, and I could feel the tension shift without even seeing his face. He asked her why his name in her phone had a bunch of laughing emojis and a vegetable emoji next to it. Our daughter froze and then turned bright red. She looked at me like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. She tried to grab the phone back, but my husband held it away and demanded an explanation. She mumbled something about it being a joke and tried to leave the room. That is when he raised his voice and told her to come back and explain what kind of joke it was. I stepped in at that point and told him to calm down because clearly she was embarrassed, and this was not a conversation to have while yelling. He snapped at me and said I should be just as upset as he was. After some pushing and a lot of awkward silence, our daughter finally admitted that the contact name was an inside joke she had with her friends. Apparently, a while ago, my husband had made a self-deprecating joke at a family barbecue about himself. He thought it was funny, and everyone laughed, including me. Teenagers being teenagers took it and ran with it. My daughter saved his contact with emojis that referenced that joke. She said she never meant for him to see it, and that it was stupid but harmless. My husband was furious. He said it was disrespectful and humiliating, and that no child should joke about their parent like that. He said it made him feel mocked in his own home. He demanded that she change the contact name immediately and apologize. Our daughter was already crying and said she was sorry, but also said it was just a joke and she did not think it was that serious. I told her she could go to her room to cool off. That is where the real argument between me and my husband started. He asked me why I was not backing him up. I told him I thought the joke was immature but not malicious, and that yelling at her was not going to teach her anything. He accused me of undermining him as a parent. I told him he was projecting his own insecurity onto a teenager. That was probably the wrong thing to say because it set him off even more. He said I was dismissing his feelings, and that if the roles were reversed and our daughter had a joke about my body, I would be livid. I thought about that, And honestly, I might have been annoyed, but I also know kids joke in stupid ways and intent matters. I told him that forcing her to change the contact name under pressure would not fix anything and would just make her resent him. I said we should talk to her calmly later and explain boundaries instead of blowing up. He stormed out of the house and went for a drive. I checked on our daughter, and she was curled up on her bed, crying into a pillow. She kept saying she did not mean to hurt her dad and that she felt disgusting and ashamed. That broke my heart. I told her she made a poor choice, but that it did not make her a bad person. I also told her that jokes about people's bodies can hurt even if you think they are funny, and that this was a learning moment. When my husband came back, he was calmer but still cold. He asked me again why I did not make her change the contact. I told him I would not force her right that second, and that I wanted her to understand why it was wrong instead of just obeying out of fear. He said that by not forcing it, I was choosing her side over his. That hurt, because I do not see parenting as sides. I see it as guiding kids while also protecting them emotionally. Over the next few days, the tension stayed thick. My husband barely spoke to our daughter, and she avoided him completely. Our son sensed something was wrong and kept asking questions we could not really answer. I suggested family counseling, and my husband said I was overreacting again. He told his brother about it, and apparently his brother agreed that our daughter was out of line and that I should have backed my husband more strongly. I started doubting myself. I talked to my friend Melissa, who has teens, and she said kids do dumb things and humiliation stays with them longer than lectures. I also talked to my coworker Daniel, who said respect goes both ways and that parents should not expect blind obedience. I even looked up some legal and parenting advice forums late at night because I was spiraling and wondering if I had failed as a spouse or as a parent. Eventually, I sat down with my daughter again and asked her what she wanted to do. She said she was willing to change the contact name because she did not want to hurt her dad, but she wished he had not yelled and made it such a big scene. She changed it on her own later that night without anyone forcing her. When my husband found out, he said it felt hollow because it did not happen when he asked. I told him maybe it mattered more that she understood and chose to do it. Right now things are slowly settling, but there is still an awkwardness that I hate. I keep wondering if I was wrong for not immediately making her change it and apologize the way he wanted. I understand that the joke touched a nerve for him, and I do not want to dismiss that. At the same time, I do not believe in shaming kids into submission. I believe in conversations even when they are uncomfortable. Stories number 8. My dad thinks guilt should buy him a place in my home. I am 28, and for most of my life, I have been the responsible one in my family. My mom, Karen, died when I was 19 after a long illness, and after that, everything kind of fell apart. My dad, Robert, never handled it well. He drank more, worked less, and leaned on everyone else to hold him up. I moved out at 21, worked 2 jobs, went to school at night, and slowly built a life I was proud of. 3 years ago, I bought a small 2-bedroom house in Indiana. Nothing fancy, but it is mine. I worked so hard for it that sometimes I still walk around touching the walls like I need to remind myself it is real. My dad has bounced around since mom died. Sometimes he stays with his brother, sometimes with friends, sometimes with a girlfriend who usually gets tired of him not helping out. About 8 months ago, he called me crying and said he had nowhere to go. He said his latest girlfriend Denise kicked him out and he was living in his truck. I felt horrible and told him he could stay with me for a little while. That was my first mistake. At first, he acted grateful. He hugged me, thanked me, told me I was a good daughter. He said he just needed a couple of months to get back on his feet. I set some simple rules. He would help with utilities. He would help with chores. He would look for steady work. The first month was okay. He gave me some money, not much, but something. He did dishes sometimes. He talked about job leads, but never seemed to actually go anywhere. By month 3, things changed. He stopped giving me money. He said his hours were cut, then later admitted he quit because his boss was disrespectful. He spent most days on my couch, watching TV, drinking beer, and complaining about how hard his life is. I started feeling like a guest in my own house. I would come home from work and he would be in the living room with his feet on my coffee table, asking me what was for dinner. If I asked him to clean up after himself, he would sigh loudly and say he was too tired. One night I snapped and told him this was not what we agreed on. I said he needed to start paying something and actually look for work. He looked at me like I slapped him. He said I was being ungrateful. He said after everything he did for me as a kid, I owed him. That word stuck with me. Owed. A few weeks later, I told him he had to move out in 2 months. I said I could not keep living like this. He did not yell. He did not argue. He got very quiet, which is how he always gets when he wants to make someone feel bad. The next day, he started his guilt campaign. He told me stories about my mom, about how she always said family should stick together. He said she would be disappointed in me. He said when he is gone one day, I will regret how I treated him. He started acting like a wounded puppy. He would sit in the kitchen, staring at nothing when I walked in. He would sigh and say things like, "Don't worry about me. I'm used to being thrown away." When I went out with friends, he would text me things like, "Hope you're having fun while I figure out where I'll sleep." I tried to talk to him calmly. I told him I am not throwing him away. I am just not able to support a grown man forever. He said a real daughter would never turn her back on her father. Then he crossed a line. One night I came home, and my aunt, Linda, was sitting in my living room with him. They were both serious. Linda told me she was concerned about how I was treating my dad. She said family should help family. My dad sat there quietly like a victim while she talked for him. I felt ambushed in my own house. I told them both that this is my home and my decision. Linda said I was being cold. My dad finally spoke and said he never thought I would be the kind of person who lets her own father struggle. I told him he is struggling because of his own choices. I told him he had months to get a job and save money, and he did not. I told him I am not his retirement plan. He stood up and started crying. He said he lost his wife, and now he is losing his daughter too. He said maybe it would have been better if he had died instead of mom. That scared me. I told him not to talk like that. He said maybe then people would care about him. After that, I locked myself in my room and cried. I felt like the worst person alive. At the same time, I felt angry. Angry that he was using my dead mother and his own life as tools to control me. Over the next few weeks, he kept doing it. Anytime I reminded him of the move-out date, he would bring up mom. He would talk about how lonely he is. He would say he has nothing without me. I started therapy because I felt like I was losing my mind. My therapist said something that changed how I see this. She said guilt is not love. She said what he is doing is emotional manipulation. Hearing that made me both relieved and sad. Relieved because I was not crazy. Sad because no one wants to believe their own parent would manipulate them. The move-out date is in 2 weeks now. My dad has not packed a single box. He still acts like I will change my mind. He still tells other family members his version of the story. I get texts from cousins and even my grandma asking how I can do this to him. I feel like I am standing alone while everyone else holds his hand. I still love my dad. That is what makes this so hard. But I also love myself. And for the first time, I am choosing myself. When I imagine him staying forever, I feel trapped and angry. When I imagine him leaving, I feel guilty and scared, but also lighter. I keep reminding myself that setting a boundary does not make me cruel. It makes me human. He is my father, but he is also a grown man. I can care about him without destroying my own life for him. I do not know what will happen when the day comes. I do not know if he will leave quietly or make a scene. I just know that if I give in now, I will be giving in for the rest of my life. Update: my dad thinks guilt should buy him a place in my home. The move-out day came and I barely slept the night before. I kept waiting for him to suddenly pack or suddenly apologize or suddenly act like a parent again. None of that happened. That morning, he woke up like it was any other day. He made coffee, turned on the TV, and sat on the couch in his pajamas. I stood in the doorway and told him that today was the day. He looked at me and said, "I figured you'd come to your senses by now." I told him I hadn't changed my mind. I reminded him of the date we agreed on. He got quiet again and said he had nowhere to go. I told him that he had months to figure that out. He said no one wants him. He said I was all he had left. I told him that was not fair to put on me. I said I am his daughter, not his lifeline. He started crying and said he must have failed as a father if I could treat him like this. That hurt more than I expected. But instead of folding like I usually do, I felt something snap into place inside me. I told him maybe he did fail sometimes, just like all parents do. But that doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my whole life to make up for it. He started yelling. He said I was heartless. He said my mom would be ashamed of me. He said I would understand when I was old and alone. I told him to stop using my mom like a weapon. I said if he kept talking like that, I would call my uncle and have him come get him. That made him quiet again. He finally went into the spare room and started throwing things into trash bags. Not boxes, just trash bags like he wanted it to look dramatic. He kept sighing loudly and saying things like, "Guess this is what being unwanted looks like?" I stayed in the kitchen because I knew if I watched him pack, I would lose my nerve. Around noon, my Uncle Mark showed up. My dad had called him without telling me. Mark came in and asked what was going on. My dad said I was kicking him out like a stranger. I told Mark the whole truth about the rules, the broken promises, the money, the guilt trips, everything. Mark looked tired. He told my dad he brought this on himself. He said he could stay with him for a while, but he had to get a job and help out. My dad didn't thank him. He just said, "I guess I don't have a choice." When they were loading his stuff into Mark's truck, my dad turned to me and said, "I hope you're happy." I said, "I hope you get better." He didn't hug me. He didn't say goodbye. He just got in the truck and left. The house felt so quiet after that. Too quiet. I walked through every room like I was checking if something was missing. What was missing was the constant tension. I didn't realize how heavy it had been until it was gone. That night, I cried. Not because I wanted him back, but because I wished things had been different. I wished he had chosen to be a father instead of a burden. I wished I didn't have to be the adult in our relationship. The next few days, family members started calling me. Some were angry, some were disappointed, some were just confused. I told the same story over and over until I got tired of explaining myself. Now when people bring it up, I just say this was necessary for me. My dad texted me once from Mark's phone. He said, "Living there is hard." He said, "Mark makes him work." He said, "He misses me." He didn't apologize. He didn't say he was wrong. He just said he misses the comfort I gave him. That told me everything. I still go to therapy. I talk a lot about guilt and how it feels like a chain around my chest. My therapist says guilt fades when you stop feeding it. Every time I almost text him to check on him, I ask myself if I am doing it out of love or out of fear. Most of the time, it is fear. I'm learning how to live in my house like it is really mine. I cook what I want. I leave dishes in the sink without someone judging me. I invite friends over without worrying about the mood in the room. I laugh more. Sometimes I feel lonely. Sometimes I miss the idea of having a dad I could lean on. But I don't miss walking on eggshells. I don't miss feeling responsible for someone else's life. I still love my dad. That hasn't changed. But love does not mean letting someone drown you to save themselves. If he ever truly changes, I will be open to talking. Not living together. Not rescuing him. Just talking. Until then, I am choosing peace, even when it feels uncomfortable. And for the first time in a long time, my home actually feels like a safe place again. Stories number 9. My friend made a religious comment at a funeral, and I reacted worse than I should have. I'm still replaying this in my head days later, and I honestly don't know if I was justified or if I completely crossed a line and ruined a friendship that mattered to me. Last week, I attended the funeral of someone who was deeply important in my life. Her name was Lauren. She wasn't family by blood, but she might as well have been. We grew up together, shared dorm rooms in college, went through breakups and job losses side by side. She died suddenly from a brain aneurysm at 34, and none of us saw it coming. The shock alone felt unreal. One minute she was texting in our group chat about brunch plans, and the next I was standing in a funeral home staring at a closed casket trying to process that she was really gone. I'm not religious. I was raised loosely Christian, but stepped away from it years ago. Lauren wasn't religious either. She was very clear about that. She believed in being kind, showing up for people, and making the most out of the time you have. That was it. One of the people who came to the funeral was my longtime friend Megan. We've known each other since high school. Megan is very religious now. Over the last decade, she's become deeply involved in her church, and faith is a huge part of her identity. We've disagreed about religion before, but we've always avoided pushing it on each other. At least I thought we had. The funeral service itself was hard, but respectful. Lauren's parents kept it neutral. No religious sermons, no prayers, just music Lauren loved and people sharing memories. I appreciated that more than I can say. After the service, there was a small gathering outside. People were hugging, crying, standing around in little clusters. I was emotionally exhausted and barely holding it together. That's when Megan came up to me and hugged me tightly. I started crying again, and she whispered how sorry she was for my loss. I thanked her. Then she pulled back, looked me straight in the eyes, and said that at least Lauren was in heaven now, and everything happens according to God's plan. Something in me snapped. I know Megan probably meant comfort. I know for her that statement brings peace. But hearing that Lauren's death was part of some plan made me feel physically sick. This wasn't a lesson. This wasn't a blessing in disguise. This was a brilliant, funny, loving person being gone forever. I didn't yell, but my voice was sharp. I told her that Lauren didn't believe in heaven and that saying it was God's plan was cruel. I said if this was God's plan then, I wanted nothing to do with it. I told her that not everyone finds comfort in religion, and this wasn't the time. Megan looked stunned. Her face went red, and she stepped back like I had slapped her. She said she was just trying to help, and that I didn't need to attack her faith. She said she would pray for me, and walked away. People definitely noticed. A few heads turned. One of Lauren's cousins looked uncomfortable. I immediately felt embarrassed and angry and devastated all at once. Later that night, Megan texted me saying she was hurt and shocked by my reaction. She said she showed up to support me, and I lashed out at her beliefs. She said grief doesn't excuse disrespect and that she expected an apology. I didn't respond right away. I keep going back and forth in my head. On one hand, I truly believe funerals are not the place to push religious interpretations onto grieving people, especially when the person who died didn't share those beliefs. On the other hand, I know Megan wasn't trying to be malicious. She was speaking from her worldview. But here's where it gets complicated. This wasn't the first time Megan has done something like this. Over the last few years, she's made comments about how she hopes I find my way back to God. She's told me she worries about my soul. She once said she believes bad things happen when people drift from faith. I usually brush it off to keep the peace. This time I couldn't. I feel guilty for snapping at a funeral. I hate the idea that I added tension to an already painful day. At the same time, I feel angry that I'm expected to swallow my discomfort to protect someone else's religious feelings while I'm actively grieving. Lauren deserved to be remembered for who she was, not turned into a talking point for someone else's faith. Some mutual friends think I should apologize just to smooth things over. One friend, Jason, told me Megan meant well and I shouldn't hold it against her. Another friend, Natalie, said Megan was out of line and I had every right to shut it down. I don't know what the right move is. I don't want to lose a friend I've had for almost 20 years, but I also don't want to pretend that what she said didn't hurt me deeply. Right now, I'm still grieving, and this conflict feels like another weight on my chest. I don't know if I should apologize for how I reacted, stand my ground, or just let the friendship fade. All I know is that funerals strip everything down to raw emotion, and sometimes what comes out isn't pretty. Update. My friend made a religious comment at a funeral, and I reacted worse than I should have. A lot has happened since I first wrote this, and I've had more conversations and sleepless nights than I can count. So I wanted to come back and put everything down while it's still fresh in my mind. I ended up responding to Megan's text 2 days later. I didn't apologize right away because I honestly didn't know what I was apologizing for. I told her I needed time and that the funeral hit me harder than I expected. She replied almost immediately and said she understood grief but still felt attacked and humiliated in public. That word stuck with me. Humiliated. It bothered me because I didn't raise my voice or make a scene, but I also know how quickly moments like that can feel bigger to the person on the receiving end. I kept thinking about whether I would have reacted the same way if she'd said something else that hurt me. The answer was probably yes. A few days later, we agreed to meet for coffee. I was nervous walking in because I didn't know if this was going to be a calm conversation or the end of a friendship. Megan got there first. She looked tense and guarded. After some awkward small talk, she told me she felt like I rejected her kindness and made her feel stupid for believing what she believes. She said her faith is how she processes death and that she thought I knew that. I told her I did know that, but that my grief isn't filtered through her faith. I told her hearing that Lauren's death was God's plan felt like her life was being reduced to a lesson I never asked for. I said I wasn't trying to attack her beliefs, but that she spoke for Lauren in a way that didn't reflect who she was. That's when Megan said something that shifted everything for me. She said she believes everyone goes to heaven whether they believe or not because God is loving, and that saying Lauren was in heaven wasn't meant to override Lauren's beliefs, but to comfort me. She said she thought I'd want reassurance that Lauren was at peace somewhere. I told her gently but clearly that peace for me would have been Lauren being alive, that trying to soften death with spiritual explanations doesn't help me and never has. I also told her this wasn't the first time her religious comments have made me uncomfortable. She got quiet when I said that. She admitted that she has been worried about me for years, that her faith teaches her to speak up even when it's uncomfortable. She said she thought I understood that, and that she was trying to save me from pain in the long run. That's when I realized we weren't actually talking about the funeral anymore. We were talking about a fundamental difference in how we see the world and how we respect each other's boundaries. I told her I don't need saving, that I need my choices to be respected, that if she wants to be my friend, she has to accept that I don't share her beliefs and don't want them applied to my life or my grief. She didn't argue, but she also didn't agree. She said it's hard for her to separate love from faith. That to her, offering God is offering care. We sat in silence for a while after that. Before we left, I told her I was sorry for snapping at her in the moment. Not for what I said, but for how sharp it came out. I said the funeral was not the place for either of us to unpack something that big. She accepted that apology, but didn't offer one of her own. Since then, things have felt different. We text, but it's surface level. No deep conversations. No check-ins. I can tell she's holding back. And honestly, so am I. A mutual friend told me Megan has been saying she feels like she has to walk on eggshells around me now. That hurt, but it also made me realize how often I've been doing that for her for years. I don't know if this friendship will fully recover, and I'm starting to accept that maybe it doesn't have to. Grief has a way of stripping things down to what really matters. Lauren's death reminded me how short life is and how little energy I have left for pretending to be okay with things that quietly hurt me. I still feel sad about how everything unfolded. I wish the moment at the funeral had never happened. I wish we both had handled it better. But I also don't regret finally saying something instead of swallowing it again. If this distance continues, I'll mourn that too. But I'm learning that protecting my emotional boundaries doesn't make me cruel, even when it makes other people uncomfortable. Right now, I'm focusing on remembering Lauren for who she was, not on smoothing over a conflict that grief brought to the surface. Stories number 10. My family is imploding because I found out a family friend was cheating with her stepson, and I don't know if I did the right thing by telling her husband. I am a 36-year-old man living in Pennsylvania, and until a few months ago, I thought my extended family circle was messy in the normal way, but fundamentally decent. Now everything feels poisoned and awkward, and I keep replaying my decision over and over, wondering if I crossed a line I can never uncross. This involves a family friend named Karen, who is 45, and her husband Mike, who is 48. I have known them since I was a teenager. Karen and my mom were close friends for years after meeting through church, and our family spent a lot of holidays together. Karen married Mike about 12 years ago. Mike had a son from a previous marriage named Tyler, who is now 22. Tyler was 10 when they got married, so Karen has been in his life most of his childhood. She always referred to him as her stepson and introduced him that way to everyone. Karen and Mike also have two younger kids together, a boy named Lucas, who is 9, and a girl named Emma, who is 6. From the outside, they look like a pretty normal blended family. Not perfect, but stable. Mike works in VAC. Karen works part-time as a real estate assistant. They host barbecues. They argue about sports and school stuff like everyone else. Nothing ever set off alarm bells for me. Tyler moved back home last year after college because he could not afford rent on his own. He was working retail and trying to figure out his next steps. It was not ideal, but it seemed understandable. I saw him at family gatherings, and he seemed a little withdrawn but polite. Karen was always hovering around him, which I chalked up to her being an overbearing parent type. The first moment that made me uncomfortable happened at a 4th of July party at Karen and Mike's house. I noticed Karen and Tyler sitting very close on the back porch. Way too close. Her hand was on his thigh while they were talking. When Mike walked by, she pulled her hand away quickly. Tyler looked flushed and nervous. I told myself I was reading too much into it because the idea of anything inappropriate felt so extreme that my brain rejected it. A few weeks later, my cousin Ryan, who is 29, pulled me aside at another gathering and asked if I had noticed anything weird between Karen and Tyler. My stomach dropped because that meant it was not just in my head. Ryan said he saw them whispering in the kitchen late at night at a previous party, and that Karen seemed overly defensive when anyone asked where Tyler was. We both agreed it was strange, but neither of us wanted to jump to conclusions. Things escalated when I accidentally saw something I cannot unsee. I was over at their house, helping Mike move some furniture into the garage. Karen was supposed to be out with Emma at a birthday party, and Lucas was at a friend's house. Mike stepped out to take a call and told me to grab a wrench from the laundry room. As I walked down the hallway, I heard voices coming from Karen's bedroom. I assumed Karen had come back early. I knocked lightly, and then the door opened suddenly. Karen was inside with Tyler. They were not fully undressed, but they were clearly intimate. They jumped apart when they saw me. Karen went pale. Tyler looked terrified. No one spoke for a few seconds. I muttered sorry and backed away, feeling like I was going to throw up. My hands were shaking. I went back to the garage and told Mike I needed to leave because I was not feeling well. I do not know if he suspected anything, but he did not push. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before driving. My brain was screaming that this was wrong on so many levels. Not just cheating, but the power dynamic. She helped raise him. She was an authority figure in his life. Even though he is legally an adult, it felt deeply disturbing. That night, Karen texted me. She said I misunderstood what I saw and begged me not to say anything to Mike. She said it would destroy the family and hurt the kids. She said Tyler was confused and going through a hard time and that she was trying to help him. That message alone made me angrier because it felt manipulative. Helping does not look like what I saw. Tyler also messaged me later. He asked me not to tell his dad. He said it would ruin everything and that he loved his siblings and did not want to lose them. He said Karen made him feel understood when no one else did. That message made my skin crawl because it sounded like grooming even if he did not realize it. I did not sleep at all that night. I felt sick and guilty and furious. I talked to my wife Megan, who is 34. She was horrified and immediately said Mike deserved to know. She said if it were happening to us, she would want someone to tell her no matter how painful it was. I agreed, but I was also scared. I knew telling Mike would blow up multiple families and permanently change relationships. For a week, I did nothing. I avoided Karen and Tyler. I avoided Mike too, because I could not look at him without feeling like I was lying by omission. Karen kept texting me saying she was begging me to stay out of it. She said she would end things and that it was a mistake. She said Mike would never recover from the betrayal. Every message felt like pressure and guilt piled on top of what I was already carrying. What finally pushed me was seeing Mike with Lucas and Emma at a park. He was laughing with them pushing Emma on the swings. Karen and Tyler were not there. I kept thinking about how Mike was living in a reality that was not real. He was making plans and trusting someone who was betraying him in one of the worst ways imaginable. I could not carry that knowledge anymore. I asked Mike to meet me for coffee. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled my drink. I told him I needed to tell him something awful and that I was sorry. I told him exactly what I saw. I did not embellish. I did not speculate. I just described the scene and the messages I received afterward. His face went blank. He asked me if I was sure. I said yes. He asked if Tyler was involved. I said yes. He put his head in his hands and did not speak for a long time. He eventually thanked me for telling him, even though it hurt. He said he needed to go home. I offered to drive him, but he said he wanted to be alone. I sat there feeling like I had just dropped a bomb and walked away. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Karen called me screaming that I ruined her life. She said I had no right to interfere in her marriage. Tyler blocked me on everything. Mike moved out with the younger kids to stay with his brother. My mom is devastated because Karen was one of her closest friends and now the entire community knows. Some people quietly thanked me. Others avoided me like I was radioactive. Mike later texted me saying he confronted Karen and she admitted everything. He said he was pursuing divorce and talking to a lawyer. He also said he did not know how to handle the situation with Tyler because he was his son and also part of the betrayal. He sounded broken. Now I am stuck in this emotional limbo. I feel relieved that I am not hiding this anymore, but also racked with guilt over the damage. Holidays are going to be a nightmare. The kids are confused. Lucas asked my mom why his parents do not live together anymore. Emma keeps asking for her dad. Tyler moved out, and no one seems to know where he is staying. Karen sent one last message saying I should have minded my own business and that adults make mistakes. I keep thinking about that phrase. This was not just a mistake. It was a violation of trust and boundaries, and something that could scar multiple people for life. Some nights I am convinced I did the right thing. Other nights I wonder if I should have stayed silent and let them implode on their own. I keep asking myself if it was my place to tell or if I acted out of my own sense of morality without considering the full consequences. I do not know if Mike would ever have found out otherwise. I do not know if telling him saved him or just hurt him sooner. All I know is that I am carrying this weight now and I cannot put it down. I told the truth, and the truth burned everything around it. I am left wondering if doing the right thing always feels this terrible. Update: my family is imploding because I found out a family friend was cheating with her stepson, and I don't know if I did the right thing by telling her husband. It has been a while since everything exploded, and I am still dealing with the ripple effects in ways I never anticipated. I thought once the truth was out, things would settle into a new normal, but instead, it feels like the ground is still shifting under all of us. A few days after I told Mike what I saw, he asked if we could talk again. We met at his brother's house, where he was staying with Lucas and Emma. He looked older somehow, like the stress had aged him overnight. He told me he had confronted Karen the same night I spoke to him. At first she denied it and accused him of believing rumors. When he mentioned me seeing them together, she broke down and admitted it had been going on for months. Hearing that made my stomach turn because it meant what I saw was not a one-time lapse, but an ongoing relationship. Mike told me he asked Tyler directly. Tyler refused to speak to him at first and locked himself in his room. Eventually he admitted it too, but framed it as mutual and consensual. Mike said that was the moment something inside him snapped. Not just as a husband, but as a father. He said he felt like he failed to protect his son, even though Tyler is technically an adult. He kept repeating that Karen had been in Tyler's life since he was a kid, and that there was no way to untangle that history. Karen moved out of the house a week later. She went to stay with her sister in another state. Before she left, she tried to talk to Mike and the kids together, but Mike refused. He said the kids needed stability and clarity, not confusing explanations. Lucas has been acting out at school, according to Mike. Emma has started wetting the bed again. Hearing about the younger kids broke my heart, because they are the ones who had no agency in any of this. As for Tyler, things have gotten darker. He stopped responding to most family members. He quit his job, and from what I hear, he is staying with a friend a few towns over. Mike told me he wants to help his son, but does not know how to even start that conversation without exploding. He said every time he thinks about it, he feels equal parts rage and grief. Rage at Karen. Grief for the version of his son he thought he knew. Guilt for not noticing sooner. Karen has not spoken to me directly since that last angry message, but I have heard plenty through the grapevine. She is telling people that Tyler came onto her and that she was lonely and emotionally neglected in her marriage. Some people believe her, some do not. My mom has been especially torn up because she feels betrayed and embarrassed. She admitted she ignored small red flags over the years because she did not want to imagine something so ugly. She apologized to me for being distant right after everything came out. She said she needed time to process her own grief. Socially, things are awkward in a way I did not fully anticipate. There are gatherings I am no longer invited to because people do not want tension. Others invite me pointedly as if taking a side. I did not want to be on any side except the side of basic decency, but it does not work that way in real life. My wife Megan has been supportive, but even she admits this has been exhausting. She worries about how much mental space this situation still occupies for me. Legally, things have also taken a turn. Mike told me he consulted a lawyer not just for divorce, but to understand if what happened crossed any legal lines. The lawyer said that while Tyler is over 18 and it may not be criminal, it could still factor heavily into custody decisions and the divorce settlement. Mike said he hates that it has to become so adversarial, but he feels like he has no choice if he wants to protect his younger kids. One thing I did not expect was to feel sympathy for Tyler alongside my anger. I do not excuse what happened, but the more I think about it, the more I see how messed up the dynamic was. Karen was an authority figure during his formative years. She helped discipline him, comfort him, and guide him. That kind of influence does not disappear the moment someone turns 18. I worry that Tyler will one day realize how deeply the situation harmed him, and that realization will hit him like a truck. Mike asked me recently if I would be willing to talk to Tyler if he reached out. He said he trusts me more than almost anyone right now. That scared me, because I do not know what the right words would be. I am not a therapist. I am just someone who stumbled into a nightmare situation and reacted the only way I knew how. Do I still question my decision? Yes, especially when I see Lucas and Emma struggling. Especially when I think about how my mom's social circle imploded. Especially when I imagine how alone Tyler must feel right now. But I also think about Mike living a lie and unknowingly trusting someone who was betraying him in one of the worst ways possible. I think about what it would say about me if I had stayed silent just to keep the peace. Mike told me something last week that stuck with me. He said the pain was inevitable whether he found out now or years from now. He said at least now he has a chance to rebuild something honest instead of living in a false reality. Hearing that eased a small part of my guilt. This whole situation has changed how I see responsibility. Silence can feel like neutrality, but sometimes it is just another form of harm. I did not ask to be put in the middle of this, but once I was there, I had to choose what kind of person I wanted to be. I still do not feel clean or righteous about it. I feel sad and tired and permanently changed. If there is one thing I have learned, it is that doing what you believe is right does not guarantee peace. Sometimes it guarantees fallout. All you can do is hope that in the long run, the truth gives people a chance to heal, even if right now it feels like everything is broken beyond repair. Update: my family is imploding because I found out a family friend was cheating with her stepson, and I don't know if I did the right thing by telling her husband. This will probably be the last time I write about this because it finally feels like the situation has reached some kind of painful but stable endpoint. Not a happy one, just a real one. A few weeks after my last update, Mike officially filed for divorce. Karen did not fight it the way I expected. From what Mike told me, she agreed to most of the terms quickly, which almost made it worse. It felt like confirmation that she just wanted out rather than any real accountability. Mike has primary custody of Lucas and Emma. Karen gets limited visitation for now, and that part has been especially hard on the kids. Lucas is old enough to sense something is deeply wrong, but not old enough to understand it. Emma still asks when her mom is coming home and sometimes cries herself to sleep. Watching Mike navigate that breaks my heart because there are no good answers that do not hurt them. Mike also started individual therapy and got Lucas into counseling through the school. He told me he should have done it sooner, but everything felt overwhelming. Therapy has helped him put words to things he was bottling up. He told me one of the hardest parts is grieving a marriage that he now realizes was not what he thought it was. He said he feels foolish for missing signs, but his therapist keeps reminding him that trust is not stupidity. That line stuck with me. Tyler finally reached out to me about a month ago. I was honestly shocked when I saw his name pop up on my phone. He asked if we could talk. We met at a diner halfway between our towns. He looked exhausted and thinner than the last time I saw him. He did not try to justify what happened the way he had before. Instead, he just looked lost. He told me he moved out because being at home felt unbearable. He said he felt blamed by everyone, but also ashamed of himself. He admitted that the relationship started with emotional conversations when he was struggling and escalated in ways he did not fully understand at the time. He said part of him knew it was wrong, but another part felt special and chosen. Hearing him say that made my stomach sink. It confirmed a lot of what I had feared about the dynamic. Tyler said he is now in therapy too. His therapist helped him see that consent can exist on paper while still being deeply compromised by history and power. He cried when he talked about that realization. I did not know what to say, so I mostly listened. At one point, he asked me if I hated him. I told him I was angry about what happened, but I did not hate him. I told him I believed he was harmed too, even if that does not erase the harm done to others. That conversation drained me emotionally, but I am glad it happened. Karen has remained mostly out of the picture. From what I hear, she is still telling her version of events to anyone who will listen, but fewer people are engaging. My mom has cut contact entirely. She told me she feels like the person she thought she knew never really existed. That loss has hit her harder than she expected. She has thanked me more than once for telling the truth, even though it shattered her social world. Hearing that helped ease some of the guilt I was carrying. As for me, things are quieter now. Not peaceful exactly, but quieter. The constant texts and emergencies have slowed. Holidays are still awkward and smaller. Some relationships will never fully recover, and I have accepted that. Megan and I talked a lot about boundaries and about how situations like this test your values in ways you cannot prepare for. She told me she is proud of me even though she knows the cost was high. That meant more to me than I realized. Do I still replay the moment I decided to tell Mike? Yes. Do I still wonder if there was a way to handle it that caused less pain? Probably, but I no longer think staying silent would have been kinder. It would have only delayed the damage and made me complicit in something that felt deeply wrong. What I have learned from all this is that truth is not a clean weapon. It does not just cut the guilty, it cuts everyone nearby. But silence can rot people from the inside out. Mike is rebuilding his life slowly and painfully, but honestly. Tyler is starting to understand the full scope of what happened to him. Lucas and Emma are getting support they need. None of that would be happening if everyone kept pretending. I did not come out of this feeling like a hero. I came out feeling older and more cautious and more aware of how fragile families really are. Sometimes doing the right thing does not bring relief. It just brings a different kind of weight. But it is a weight I can live with. Stories number 11. My roommate is furious after I used her groceries to feed my friends even though I paid her back. I am a 24-year-old guy living in a 3-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city. I share the place with 2 roommates. One is my friend Kyle, who I have known since college. The other is a woman named Rachel who moved in about 8 months ago. We all split rent and utilities evenly, and for the most part things have been fine. Rachel and I are not close, but we are polite. We have separate shelves in the fridge and pantry, and we usually buy our own food. There has never been a written rule about groceries, just an unspoken understanding that you do not use what you did not buy unless you ask first. I have followed that rule, and so has she, at least until now. About 3 weeks ago, I had a group of friends over on a Saturday night. It was not a wild party, just 5 of us watching a game and hanging out. Kyle was there too. I planned to order food, but the delivery app was backed up and the wait time was over an hour. Everyone was hungry and annoyed, and I felt responsible since I invited them. I checked my own fridge and realized I did not have nearly enough to feed everyone. Kyle did not either. Rachel was not home and had mentioned earlier that she would be gone all weekend. I opened the fridge again and saw that Rachel had a lot of groceries: pasta, sauce, chicken, vegetables, snacks, and drinks. Way more than usual. In the moment, I made a decision that I thought was reasonable. I used some of her groceries to cook dinner for everyone. I made pasta with chicken and vegetables and put out some chips. I was careful not to use everything, and I made a mental note of what I took. I told myself I would replace it or give her money the next day. The night went fine, and everyone left. The next morning, I went to the grocery store and bought replacements for everything I used. Some items were not the same brand, so I also put cash in an envelope to cover the difference. I left the groceries in the fridge and the envelope on the counter with a note that said I was sorry and that I had friends over unexpectedly. Rachel came home that evening and texted me almost immediately asking if I had touched her food. I told her yes and explained what happened and said I replaced everything and left money. She came into my room visibly angry. She said it was not about the money. She said I violated her space and her boundaries and that she budgets carefully for food. I apologized again and told her I understood why she was upset. I explained that I did not think it would be a big deal since I replaced everything and even added extra. That made her more upset. She said the fact that I assumed it would not be a big deal was the problem. She says she does not care if I paid her back because she did not consent to feeding my friends. Kyle tried to step in and calm things down, but that just made it worse. Rachel said this was not a group discussion and that she was talking to me. She said she now feels uncomfortable leaving food in a shared space because she cannot trust that it will not be used. I told her I would never do it again and that I genuinely thought I was fixing the issue by replacing everything immediately. She said an apology does not undo the disrespect. She then went into her room and slammed the door. Since then, the apartment has been tense. Rachel barely speaks to me except about bills. Kyle thinks she is overreacting and says paying her back should have been the end of it. Another friend I talked to said I crossed the line no matter what, and that money does not equal permission. I honestly did not mean to disrespect her. I did not think I was stealing since I replaced everything within hours. At the same time, I can see how using someone's food without asking feels invasive, especially in a shared living situation. Now I am stuck wondering whether I handled this badly or if she is taking it too far. I have already apologized multiple times and do not know what else I can do without groveling. I am trying to be fair and take responsibility, but I also feel like this has turned into something bigger than it needed to be. Update: my roommate is furious after I used her groceries to feed my friends, even though I paid her back. It has been a few weeks since I posted, and the situation with Rachel did not just fade away like I hoped it would. If anything, the tension slowly turned into something heavier and more uncomfortable than the original argument. At first, I tried to give her space. I stopped using any shared areas when she was home and kept everything strictly separated. I labeled my food, moved some of it into my room, and made a point of not touching anything that was not mine. I thought time plus changed behavior would help smooth things over. It did not. Rachel stayed distant and cold. She started keeping most of her groceries in her room, including things that used to go in the fridge. I noticed a mini fridge appear in her bedroom a few days later. That felt like a clear signal that she no longer trusted the shared space at all. A week after the incident, she asked to talk. I honestly thought this would be a chance to clear the air. Instead, she told me she had been thinking a lot about what happened and that it made her feel unsafe living here. She said food might seem small to me, but to her, it represented control, consent, and respect. She said she grew up in a household where her things were constantly taken and dismissed, and this brought all of that back. That was the first time I really understood why her reaction was so intense. I apologized again, not in a quick defensive way, but genuinely. I told her I never considered that kind of history and that I was wrong to assume replacing things would erase the issue. I told her I should have waited or found another solution instead of making the call myself. She accepted the apology, but said it did not change how she felt. She said trust is not something she can flip back on just because someone says sorry. She also said she was considering asking the landlord about moving out early or changing rooms when the lease renews. That is when the situation started to feel more serious. Kyle was frustrated because he felt like the apartment was becoming hostile over what he still sees as a mistake that was already corrected. He told Rachel that while she had a right to be upset, holding on to it this long was making the living situation miserable for everyone. That conversation did not go well. Rachel accused Kyle of minimizing her feelings and siding with me just because we are friends. She said she feels ganged up on and isolated in the apartment. Kyle later told me he regrets getting involved at all. Since then, communication has basically dropped to zero. We coordinate bills through text. We avoid each other in common spaces. The apartment feels tense and uncomfortable in a way it never did before. I spent a lot of time thinking about whether I still believe I was justified. The honest answer is no. I do not think I was malicious, but I do think I made a choice that prioritized convenience and social pressure over someone else's boundaries. Paying her back fixed the material loss, not the violation of trust. At the same time, I also do not think this situation could have been resolved perfectly no matter what I did afterward. Once that boundary was crossed, it became about more than groceries. It became about control and safety for her, and about defensiveness and pride for me. At this point, I am looking into my options for when the lease ends. I do not think this is a living situation that can fully recover. I learned a hard lesson about shared spaces and consent, even with something as ordinary as food. If nothing else, this experience taught me that fixing a mistake is not the same as undoing it, and that sometimes the consequences are simply having to sit with discomfort until everyone can move on in their own way. Update: my roommate is furious after I used her groceries to feed my friends, even though I paid her back. This will be the final update because the situation has finally reached a resolution, even if it is not a satisfying one for everyone involved. The short version is that Rachel is moving out, and I am staying, but the way it unfolded forced me to confront how much damage a single bad decision can cause in a shared living space. About a month after my last update, Rachel formally told us she would not be renewing the lease. She said she had already spoken to the landlord about transferring her portion when the lease ended and was looking for a place on her own. She was calm when she said it, not angry, just firm. It felt less like a threat and more like a boundary she had already decided on. Kyle and I talked privately after that. He admitted that while he still thinks her reaction spiraled beyond the original issue, he could see how living somewhere you no longer feel respected would make anyone want to leave. He also admitted that if the roles were reversed, he would probably feel violated too, even if he got his money back. A week later, Rachel asked to talk one last time. I appreciated that she did. She told me she did not hate me and did not think I am a bad person. She said she believes me when I say I did not mean harm. But she also said intention does not matter as much as impact when it comes to boundaries. She said once that trust was broken, she realized she did not want to spend another year feeling on edge in her own home. I apologized again, not expecting forgiveness, just wanting to acknowledge my part fully. I told her I understood why she was leaving and that if I could undo that night, I would. She thanked me for saying that and said she hoped this would be a learning moment for both of us. Since then, the apartment has been quieter, awkward, but calmer. Rachel has already moved most of her things out and only comes by occasionally to grab the rest. We keep interactions brief and polite. There is no hostility now, just distance. Living through this changed how I think about shared spaces. I used to believe that fixing something financially meant fixing it entirely. I now understand that some boundaries are not transactional. You cannot retroactively buy permission. You either respect it in the moment or you deal with the fallout. I still feel bad that this ended in someone uprooting their life over a decision I made under pressure. At the same time, I accept that discomfort is part of accountability. This is not a story where I get to feel completely right or completely wrong. It is just one where I made a mistake, tried to fix it, and still had to live with the consequences. I am sharing this final update because a lot of people said this would either blow over or explode. It did neither. Stories number 12. My best friend outlived all his family, and it breaks my heart. I am a 38-year-old man, and I never thought grief could belong to someone else in a way that still felt like it was crushing my own chest. My best friend and I have known each other since we were 8 years old. We grew up on the same street in a small town in Pennsylvania. Our bikes were always dumped in the same driveway. Our parents knew each other. Our lives were tangled together in a way that felt permanent and unbreakable back then. My friend came from a big, loud family. He had 2 sisters and a younger brother. His parents were the kind of people who hosted every holiday, whether they had the space or not. I spent more Thanksgivings at their house than my own because my dad worked nights. His mom would always pile extra food on my plate and tell me I was too skinny. His dad taught us how to throw a baseball properly and how to change a tire. Their house felt alive all the time. Life started taking pieces from him slowly and then all at once. His younger brother was the first to go. A car accident right after high school graduation. I still remember standing next to my friend at the funeral, while he stared straight ahead like his body was there, but his soul had stepped out. He was only 19 then, and already learning a kind of pain most people never have to face that young. A few years later, his dad got sick. Cancer, the aggressive kind that does not give you time to adjust. I remember hospital rooms that smelled like disinfectant and coffee. I remember my friend making dark jokes to keep everyone else from crying. His dad died within a year of the diagnosis. At that point, my friend was in his mid-20s and already carrying more loss than anyone should. His mom held the family together after that. She was strong in a quiet, stubborn way. She checked in on all of us even after we were grown. When she passed from a stroke a few years later, it felt unreal. I remember my friend sitting on the front steps of the house after everyone left, just staring at the door, like he expected her to come back inside. One of his sisters moved away and lost touch. The other struggled with addiction for years. We tried to help. He tried harder than anyone. Rehab stays, late-night phone calls, promises that never stuck. She overdosed when my friend was 33. He found out from a police officer knocking on his door. I was there that night, and I will never forget the sound he made when he slid down the wall and just stopped functioning for a while. The last remaining family member was his oldest sister. She was the responsible one. Married with kids. She tried to keep traditions alive. She invited him over for holidays. She checked on him constantly. When she was diagnosed with a heart condition, we all thought it was manageable. Then one morning, she did not wake up. Just like that, the last thread snapped. My best friend is now 39, and he has no parents, no siblings, no grandparents, no aunts or uncles he is close to. Family to him is a word that points backward instead of forward. When people ask about his family at work, he just says they passed and changes the subject. Watching that happen to someone you love is a special kind of helplessness. He does not talk about it much unless he is drinking, and even then he keeps it surface level. He jokes. He deflects. He says dark things with a smile so people will laugh instead of asking more questions. But I see it in the quiet moments. I see it when holidays come around and he suddenly gets busy. I see it when he sits at my kitchen table, watching my kids argue over cereal, and his eyes get this faraway look. There are moments when the weight of it hits him out of nowhere, like when he had surgery last year and needed an emergency contact. He stood there, staring at the form longer than necessary. He ended up writing my name down. That was when it really sank in for me that if something happens to him, I am the call. Me. Not a parent, not a sibling, just me and a few friends. I try to show up without smothering him. I invite him over. I make sure he has a place to be on holidays. My wife does the same and treats him like family because in many ways he is. Still, I know it is not the same. You cannot replace a lifetime of blood connections with good intentions. I know that when my parents call me, I have something he does not. A safety net that still exists. Sometimes I feel guilty talking about my own family problems around him. Complaining about my dad being annoying or my sister borrowing money feels obscene when I know what he has lost. He never makes me feel bad about it. That almost makes it worse. He listens. He gives advice. He is still the solid, dependable person he always was, even though life took almost everything from him. I have asked him before if he wants to talk more about it or if he has ever considered therapy. He shrugs it off and says talking will not bring them back. Maybe he is right. Maybe one day it will catch up to him in a way he cannot outrun. I worry about that more than I probably should. I worry about him being alone in the world when he gets older. I worry about what happens if I move away or if something happens to me. What breaks my heart the most is that he never complains. Not really. He does not ask why him. He does not lash out. He just keeps going. He goes to work. He pays his bills. He shows up for my kids' birthdays. He remembers everyone else's losses, even though his own are heavier than anyone I know. Sometimes resilience looks noble. Sometimes it just looks exhausting. Update: my best friend outlived all his family, and it breaks my heart. A lot has happened since I first wrote this, and I did not expect things to shift the way they did. After I posted, I sat with that knot in my chest for a few days before I finally decided to talk to Michael more directly instead of just orbiting around his grief like I always do. I realized I was so afraid of saying the wrong thing that I was saying almost nothing at all. The moment came in a very ordinary way. He came over on a Sunday afternoon to watch a game with me. Sarah took the kids to her parents' house, so it was just the two of us like it used to be before life got complicated. At some point, the game faded into background noise, and we were just sitting there, drinking beer. I told him I had written something about him and about how much I worry. I expected him to shut down immediately. Instead, he just nodded and said, "Yeah, I figured something like that." That cracked something open. He told me that the hardest part lately was not even the memories, it was the future. He said it messes with his head, knowing there is no one left who remembers him as a kid, no one who can tell stories about him before he became who he is now. He said sometimes he feels like a ghost walking around a world that moved on without his past. Hearing him put it into words made my throat tighten because it was worse than anything I imagined. He admitted that he avoids holidays because the quiet afterward is brutal. He said being around my kids makes him happy, but also sad in a way he cannot explain without feeling selfish. He said the emergency contact form still bothers him, and that writing my name down made everything feel too real. I told him that being someone's emergency contact is not a burden to me. I told him it is an honor. He looked away for a long time after that. Something unexpected happened a week later. Michael called me late at night, which he almost never does. He said he had been thinking about therapy and asked if I would help him look into it because the idea overwhelmed him. That alone felt like a huge step. We spent an hour the next day going through options, and he ended up scheduling an appointment with a therapist named Karen, who specializes in grief and long-term loss. I did not push. I just sat there and let him lead. He has been going for a few weeks now. He does not share details, and I do not ask. What I have noticed is small things. He does not deflect as much with jokes. He does not disappear as completely when dates come up that used to knock him flat. On the anniversary of his sister Jessica's death, he came over instead of being alone. We grilled in the backyard and did not talk about anything heavy unless he brought it up. When he left, he hugged me longer than usual. Another thing that changed is how my kids see him. Lucas asked why Uncle Michael does not have grandparents like his friends do. I panicked for half a second, but then Michael answered himself. He told Lucas that sometimes families are short and sometimes they are long, and sometimes you have to build parts of them yourself. Lucas accepted that immediately and went back to his toys. Emma made Michael a drawing the next day and told him it was so he would always have someone thinking about him. He cried in my driveway after that. I also realized I needed to adjust my own behavior. I stopped censoring my normal life around him. Not in a careless way, but in an honest one. I still complain sometimes. I still talk about my parents. I let him be part of the mess instead of treating him like he might break. He told me that made him feel more normal than anything else lately. There was one hard moment I did not expect. Michael told me he ran into an old neighbor who mentioned his parents and siblings in the same breath like they were still around. He said it knocked the wind out of him. Instead of shutting down, he called me from his car. We sat on the phone in silence for a while. That might sound small, but for him it was not. I still worry about him. I do not think that will ever fully stop. Grief like his does not resolve neatly. It just changes shape. What feels different now is that I am not carrying this worry alone in my head. He knows I see it. He knows he is not invisible in it. He told me recently that being the last one left made him feel like an ending instead of a continuation, and that maybe now he is starting to feel like something can still grow forward. Final update. My best friend outlived all his family, and it breaks my heart. I wanted to come back one last time because things have settled into something that finally feels honest instead of just survivable. It has been a few months since I wrote the last update, and I needed time to understand what was actually changing versus what just felt hopeful in the moment. Michael kept going to therapy, and at some point, it stopped being something he was just enduring. He told me that for the first time, he was not trying to solve his grief or outrun it. He was learning how to live with it without letting it define every quiet moment. That sentence alone told me how far he had come because he never talked like that before. He used to frame everything as something to be handled alone and silently. One of the biggest shifts happened around the holidays. Instead of waiting for an invitation and then canceling at the last minute like he used to, Michael asked if he could help host. Not take over, but help. He wanted to cook something his mom used to make, and he wanted my kids to help even if they messed it up. Watching him stand in the kitchen with Lucas arguing about how much salt was too much and Emma sneaking bites when she thought no one was looking was something I will never forget. He looked tired, but grounded in a way I had not seen in years. There was a moment after dinner when everyone else was distracted, and he quietly told me that this was the first holiday that did not feel like a reminder of what was gone. It felt like proof that something still existed. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. I realized then that staying had mattered more than any speech or advice I ever gave him. Michael also did something that scared him a lot. He reconnected with extended family he had drifted away from after his immediate family passed. Nothing dramatic, just emails at first. Then a phone call. Then a visit. He told me he avoided them for years because being the last one left made him feel like a walking memorial. Now he said he understands that being remembered is not the same as being stuck in the past. He does not talk to them constantly, but knowing there are people who share pieces of his history softened something in him. On my end, I had to face a hard truth. Part of my fear was selfish. I was scared that one day Michael would need me more than I could give. Therapy helped him, but it also helped me realize that friendship is not about being the only lifeline. It is about being a steady one. I stopped trying to anticipate every low point and just focused on being present when he reached out. There was one night recently when he called me and said he was having a bad one. No dramatic backstory, just a heavy night. I went over. We sat in silence for a while. Then he talked about his brother Tyler and a stupid argument they once had over nothing. He laughed at how pointless it was, and then cried, because there would never be a chance to make it right. He did not apologize for crying. That alone felt like a milestone. The kids see him differently now too, not as someone fragile or sad, but as Uncle Michael who shows up and listens and remembers their favorite things. Emma asked him if he would come to her school play, even though it was not a big role. He did. He sat in the front row and clapped like it was Broadway. Later he told me that being invited into those small moments makes the future feel less empty. Michael told me recently that he does not feel like an ending anymore. He said he feels like a branch that lost its trunk but is still alive and capable of growing in strange directions. That might sound poetic, but for him it was practical. He started making plans again. Nothing huge. A trip next year. A class he wants to take. A vague idea of dating again without pressure. All things that once felt impossible. I know grief does not disappear. I know there will be anniversaries and random Tuesdays that knock the wind out of him. But now when that happens, he does not disappear. He reaches out. He lets people see him. And I have learned that loving someone through loss does not mean fixing it. It means staying long enough that they believe tomorrow exists again. Stories number 13. My boyfriend might actually believe experiencing SA is the result of moral failure. I am 26, and for most of my life, I have worked really hard to believe I am not broken. 2 years ago, before I met my current boyfriend, something happened to me that changed how I see the world. I was assaulted by someone I knew, a guy named Caleb who had been part of my wider friend group. I never talk about details because I don't need people picking apart my pain like it is a puzzle they get to solve. What matters is that I did not choose it. I did not want it. And it took me a long time to stop thinking it was somehow my fault. Therapy helped me. My therapist, Dr. Miller, helped me understand that being hurt does not mean you invited it. She taught me that shame often grows in silence, and that speaking about what happened, even carefully, takes away some of its power. I thought I had reached a place where what happened to me did not define me anymore. I thought I was strong again. Then I met my boyfriend, Nathan. Nathan is 29, and we have been together for about a year and a half. He is charming, confident, and very sure of his beliefs. He talks a lot about values and standards and being a good person in a bad world. At first, I admired that, He seemed stable and serious in a way that made me feel safe. For the first 8 months, I didn't tell him about my assault. Not because I was hiding it, but because it is not something I share lightly. I waited until I really believed he cared about me, not just the version of me that is easy and fun. One night, we were lying in bed talking about past relationships and things that shaped us. He told me about an ex named Brianna who cheated on him and how it made him lose trust in people. He said he wanted to know everything about me, even the hard parts. So I told him. I didn't go into details. I just said that 2 years ago, someone I trusted crossed a line and assaulted me, and that it took a lot of work for me to feel okay again. He went very quiet. Not sad quiet, not gentle quiet, just still. Then he asked me what I had done to end up in that situation. That question alone made my stomach twist. I told him I didn't do anything. I said I trusted the wrong person, and that was it. He nodded, but his face didn't look convinced. He said, I just believe things don't happen for no reason. I asked him what he meant. He said he believes the world is fair in a moral way, and that when bad things happen, it usually means someone made bad choices somewhere. He said he wasn't trying to blame me, but he also wasn't sure he believed someone could be completely innocent in something like that. I felt like I was back in that old place, where every part of me wondered what I did wrong. I told him that what he was saying sounded like blame. He said I was being too sensitive, and that he was just being honest. After that night, something shifted between us. He started making little comments that didn't sit right. If I wore something tight, he would say things like, "You know how men think." If I went out with friends, he would remind me to be careful what signals you send. Once, when we were talking about a news story involving an assault, he said, I just think people need to take responsibility for the situations they put themselves in. Every time he said something like that, I felt smaller. A few weeks later, we went to a party with his friends. I met his coworker Jason and Jason's girlfriend Megan. Everyone was drinking and talking. At one point, someone brought up a celebrity scandal involving assault. Megan said something about how no one deserves that. Nathan laughed a little and said, well, I think life reflects your choices. The room got quiet. Megan looked at him and said, that's a messed up thing to say. Nathan shrugged and said people just don't like hearing the truth. I felt frozen. He knew my story. He still said that. On the way home, I asked him why he talks like that when he knows what I went through. He said my situation was different, but he couldn't explain how. He said he just believes morality works like gravity, that bad actions attract bad outcomes. I told him that sounded like he believed I must have done something bad to deserve what happened to me. He said he didn't want to say that, but he also didn't want to lie to himself. That sentence broke something in me. Since then, I have noticed how deep this belief goes. He judges people harshly. If someone is poor, he says they didn't work hard enough. If someone is sick, he says they didn't take care of themselves. If someone is hurt, he looks for what they did to earn it. Being with him has started to feel unsafe in a way I didn't expect. Not physically unsafe, but emotionally unsafe. Like my pain is always on trial. I talked to my best friend Tasha about it. She got angry for me. She said, he basically thinks you're morally flawed because someone hurt you. Hearing it said that way made me realize how serious this is. I also talked to my therapist about it. She said that what Nathan believes is called just world thinking. The idea that the world is fair and people get what they deserve. She said it is comforting for some people because it makes them feel protected. Like bad things won't happen to them if they behave correctly. But she also said it is cruel because it turns victims into villains. She asked me how it feels to be with someone who might secretly believe I deserved my worst moment. I didn't know how to answer without crying. Now I find myself questioning everything. When he hugs me, does he see me as damaged? When he says he loves me, does he think he is loving someone who failed some invisible moral test? If something bad happened to me again, would he support me or would he search for my mistake? I still care about him. That makes this confusing. He is not cruel in obvious ways. He doesn't yell or hit or insult me directly. But his beliefs hang over our relationship like a shadow. They touch everything, even when he is being kind. I don't know how to build a future with someone who might think my trauma is proof of my failure. I don't know how to feel safe with someone who sees the world as a courtroom and everyone as a suspect. Some days I think I am overthinking. Some days I think I am finally seeing clearly. I spent years learning that what happened to me did not define my worth. I am not willing to give that up to be loved by someone who might never truly believe me. Update: my boyfriend might actually believe experiencing SA is the result of moral failure. It has been a few weeks since I wrote everything out, and I didn't realize how much putting it into words would change how I see my own life. After that night where Nathan said he didn't want to lie to himself about what he believes, I started paying closer attention to everything he said, not just about me, but about the world. I noticed how often he talks in verdicts. People are either smart or stupid, strong or weak, worthy or not. There is no space in his thinking for accidents, bad luck, or cruelty that comes from others. Everything is a reflection of character in his eyes. That started to make me feel like I was constantly being evaluated. If I had a bad day at work, I caught myself wondering if he would secretly think I deserved it. If I felt anxious or sad, I wondered if he saw that as another personal flaw. One night, we were watching a movie where a woman gets attacked. I felt my body tense like it always does. Nathan didn't notice at first. Then he said, she shouldn't have gone there alone. He didn't say it with anger, just certainty. I paused the movie and asked him if he really thinks that means what happened to her was her fault. He sighed like I was exhausting him. He said fault is a complicated word, but responsibility is not. He said people have a duty to protect themselves, and if they don't, consequences happen. I told him consequences are not the same as blame. I told him someone choosing to hurt you is not a natural law like gravity. He said I was getting emotional again and turning it into something personal. I said it is personal because he is talking about the exact thing that almost broke me. He looked uncomfortable, but not apologetic. He said he hates seeing me upset, but he can't change what he believes just to make me feel better. He said honesty matters more than comfort. That night I slept on the couch, even though we lived together. I stared at the ceiling and realized I did not feel safe opening my heart to him anymore. Not because he would yell or leave, but because he would judge. The next day, I called my therapist and asked for an emergency session. I told her everything. She listened quietly and then asked me a simple question. She asked, if you had a daughter and something like this happened to her, would you want her with someone who thinks this way? I didn't even have to think. I said no. She said sometimes love is not enough if the foundation underneath it is cracked. She said values are not just opinions, they're how people decide who deserves compassion. That week I talked more with my friend Tasha. She said she has never liked how Nathan talks about people. She said she always felt like he was one bad day away from turning that thinking on me fully. I started noticing how much I had already changed myself to avoid his judgment. I dress differently around him. I talk less about my feelings. I hide parts of myself that feel too broken for his moral system. One evening, he came home annoyed because a coworker had been promoted instead of him. He said the guy must be playing the victim card. I realized in that moment that if I ever needed real support, if something bad happened to me again, Nathan would not see me as someone who needed love. He would see me as someone who failed a test. That scared me more than being alone ever could. So I told him we needed to talk. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told him that his beliefs hurt me and make me feel unsafe. And that I don't think I can build a life with someone who might believe I deserved my trauma. He said I was twisting his words. He said he never said I deserved it. I said he has said enough for me to know how he thinks. I said love without respect for my reality is not love I can live with. He said I was throwing away something good, because I can't handle a different opinion. I said this is not about politics or movies or food. This is about whether he sees me as innocent or flawed for being hurt. He didn't have an answer that made me feel better. He just kept saying he is who he is. So I told him I needed space. Real space. I packed a bag and went to stay with Tasha. That first night, I cried harder than I have in a long time. Not just for the relationship, but for the version of me that kept trying to earn compassion from someone who rationed it. Nathan texted me a lot at first. He said he misses me. He said he didn't mean to hurt me, but he never said he was wrong. He never said he believes me without conditions. That silence says more than any argument. I don't know yet if this is the end or just a pause. What I do know is that being away from him has made my chest feel lighter. I laugh more easily. I talk about my feelings without worrying how they will be judged. For the first time in a long time, I am not trying to prove that I deserve kindness. I am letting myself have it. I don't want a partner who sees the world as a courtroom. I want someone who sees it as a place where people get hurt sometimes and deserve care when they do. Whatever happens next, I am not going back to a life where my pain has to defend itself. Update. My boyfriend might actually believe experiencing SA is the result of moral failure. It has been a couple of months since I left Nathan's apartment and went to stay with Tasha, and I didn't realize how much space changes your vision until I finally had some. Being away from him felt like stepping out of a room that was always just a little too cold. At first, I kept waiting to miss him the way people say you're supposed to miss someone you love. Instead, what I mostly felt was quiet. Nathan kept texting for the first 2 weeks. Some messages were sad, some were angry, some were sweet. He said he loved me. He said I was making a mistake. He said no one would ever understand me like he did. He said I was being dramatic. He said he was willing to try if I would just come home. I noticed something in all of those messages. He talked about losing me. He talked about how he felt. He talked about how unfair this was to him. He never once said he understood why I was hurt. He never once said my experience mattered on its own, without conditions. One night he called me crying. He said he was scared to be alone. He said he felt like I abandoned him. Hearing that almost pulled me back in, because that old instinct to fix things is still inside me. But then he said, I just don't get why you can't accept that people have to live with the consequences of their choices. I asked him if he still thinks that includes what happened to me. He was quiet, then said he doesn't want to talk about that topic anymore, because it just causes problems between us. That was my answer. I told him I'm not a topic. I'm a person, and what happened to me is part of my life. If he can't face it with compassion, then he doesn't get to be close to me. He said I was giving him an ultimatum. I said no, I was giving myself one. After that, I stopped responding. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Living with Tasha has been healing in ways I didn't expect. She doesn't tiptoe around me. She doesn't look at me like I'm fragile. She just treats me like a normal person who sometimes needs extra patience. We cook together, watch dumb shows, laugh at stupid things. Sometimes I forget about Nathan completely, and when I remember him, it feels like remembering a dream that didn't make sense. I kept going to therapy, and one day I told Dr. Miller that I think I finally understand something. I said I spent so long trying to prove I wasn't broken that I almost stayed with someone who needed me to be broken for his worldview to make sense. She said that was a powerful realization. A few weeks ago, I ran into Nathan at a grocery store. I wasn't ready for it. My heart started racing and my hands went cold. He looked thinner. He said my name like he had been waiting to say it. He asked if we could talk. I said we could talk right there. He said he's been thinking a lot. He said he still believes in personal responsibility, but he also believes he might have been too harsh. He said he misses me and wants to try again. I asked him one simple question. I asked, Do you believe what happened to me was not my fault in any way? He didn't answer right away. He said, it's complicated. He said life is complicated. He said he doesn't like simple answers. I told him I do. I told him some things in life should be simple, like believing people when they say they were hurt. I told him I can't build a future with someone who needs my worst moment to fit into a theory. He looked sad, but not changed. We said goodbye in a quiet way. No yelling, no drama, just two people who finally understood they don't belong in each other's lives. After that, I cried in my car. But it wasn't the kind of cry that feels like breaking. It felt like letting go of something heavy. Since then, I've started to imagine my future again. Not as something I have to earn by being good enough, but as something I'm allowed to have just by being alive. I don't know who I'll love next, or when, but I know what I won't accept. I won't accept being seen as a moral lesson instead of a human being. I won't accept love that comes with silent judgment attached. I won't accept a world where my pain has to prove its innocence. What happened to me does not make me weak, dirty, or flawed. It makes me someone who survived something terrible and kept going. I don't need a partner who explains my trauma. I need one who believes me. Stories number 14. My mother-in-law exploded after I asked her to do her own dishes. I never thought something as small as dirty dishes would turn into a full-blown family conflict. But here I am, questioning my sanity in my place in my own home. I'm a 29-year-old woman, married to my husband Andrew for 4 years. We live in a small but comfortable house in Ohio. No kids yet, just us and our routine. Andrew works long hours as an engineer, and I work remotely in marketing, which means I'm home most of the time. Andrew's mother, Carol, lives about 2 hours away. She's retired, divorced, and very involved in Andrew's life. I knew going into this marriage that she was going to be a strong presence. I thought I could handle it. Carol comes to stay with us often, sometimes for a weekend, sometimes for a week. This last visit was supposed to be 10 days because she had a doctor appointment nearby and didn't want to stay in a hotel. I agreed, even though part of me already felt tired just thinking about it. From the moment she arrived, the dynamic shifted. Carol doesn't cook, she doesn't clean, she doesn't ask if she can help. She uses dishes constantly and leaves them in the sink, on the counter, sometimes even in the living room. Coffee mugs, plates, bowls with dried food stuck to them. At first, I cleaned them without saying anything. I told myself she was a guest. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it wasn't worth the tension. But days passed, and it became clear this was her expectation. I'd wake up to a sink full of dishes that weren't there when I went to bed. I'd finish work and immediately start cleaning before making dinner. Carol would sit at the table, scrolling on her phone or watching TV while I washed everything. Andrew noticed, but he didn't say much. When I brought it up gently, he said she's always been like that, and it's just easier not to rock the boat. That sentence stayed with me. One night, after cooking dinner for all of us, I realized I was done being quiet. Carol finished eating, put her plate in the sink, and walked away. No thank you, no offer to help. I took a breath and said calmly that since she was staying with us for over a week, I'd appreciate it if she could rinse and wash her own dishes, or at least help out. She froze. Then she laughed, like I had made a joke. When she realized I was serious, her face hardened. She said she was a guest, and guests don't do chores. She said she raised Andrew and didn't come here to be treated like a roommate. I told her I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but this is my home, and I'm not her maid. I said I work full-time too, and it's exhausting to clean up after another adult every day. That's when she lost it. She said I was ungrateful. She said Andrew never complained about her. She said I was clearly raised without proper manners. She accused me of trying to drive a wedge between her and her son. Andrew walked in halfway through this and just stood there, stunned. Carol started crying and said she couldn't believe the woman her son married would treat her this way. She said if she wasn't welcome, she'd leave immediately. Andrew tried to calm her down. He told her to sit and that we could talk it out. Then he looked at me and asked if I could have handled it differently. That hurt more than anything Carol said. I told him I had been handling it differently for days by silently cleaning up after her. I told him I felt invisible in my own house. I told him it wasn't about dishes anymore. It was about respect. Carol packed a bag that night and slept in the guest room with the door shut. The next morning, she barely spoke to me. She left 2 days early and hugged Andrew tightly at the door, completely ignoring me. Since then, Andrew and I have been tense. He says he understands my frustration, but wishes I had just waited until she left. He says his mom feels deeply hurt and embarrassed. I feel angry. I feel guilty. I feel resentful. Part of me wonders if I really was wrong to speak up. Another part of me is terrified that if I don't draw boundaries now, this will be my life forever. I married Andrew, not his mother. But right now, it feels like I'm the outsider in my own marriage for wanting basic consideration. I don't know if I owe Carol an apology or if Andrew owes me backup. All I know is that something small exposed something much bigger, and I'm not sure where that leaves us. Update. My mother-in-law exploded after I asked her to do her own dishes. A lot has happened since that visit, and I feel like the situation cracked open things in my marriage that I didn't realize were already fragile. After Carol left early, the house felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just heavy. Andrew and I didn't really talk about what happened for a few days. We went through the motions of work, dinner, and sleep, but there was this unspoken tension hanging over everything. Eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore, and I told Andrew we needed to talk, not about the dishes, but about us. I told him that what hurt the most wasn't his mom's reaction, it was his. The fact that he watched me struggle for days, knew I was overwhelmed, and still chose to stay neutral. I told him that when he asked if I could have handled it differently, it felt like he was siding with her and leaving me alone in my own home. Andrew got defensive at first. He said he was caught off guard and didn't know how to react. He said his mom has always been emotional, and that growing up, the easiest way to deal with her was to give in and keep the peace. He said he wasn't trying to invalidate me, he was just trying to stop things from blowing up. I told him that by avoiding conflict with her, he created conflict with me, that I shouldn't have to swallow my feelings to protect his mother from discomfort, that this wasn't about disrespecting her, it was about expecting basic help from an adult who was staying in our house for an extended period. That's when he finally went quiet and really listened. He admitted that he's used to his mom being taken care of, that she leaned on him a lot after his parents divorced, and that saying no to her makes him feel like a bad son. He said he never thought about how that dynamic affects me now that we're married. We talked for hours that night. Some of it was calm. Some of it was emotional. I cried more than I expected to. I told him I was scared that this would be our future every time his mom visited, that I would be expected to accommodate her completely while he stayed out of it. Andrew apologized. Not a vague one, but a real one. He said he should have backed me up in the moment, and that he understands now why I felt disrespected. He also admitted that asking me to just wait it out was unfair. A week later, Carol called Andrew and asked if she could come over to talk. He asked me how I felt about it, and for the first time, he actually waited for my answer instead of assuming. I agreed, but only if we were all on the same page about expectations. When Carol came over, I was nervous, but determined not to let myself be talked over. She didn't apologize at first. She said she felt pushed out and embarrassed. She said she never meant to make me feel like a maid, but that in her generation, guests aren't expected to do chores. I told her I understood generational differences, but that staying for 10 days isn't the same as visiting for dinner. I told her I didn't mind helping, but I wasn't willing to be the only one cleaning. I told her I need to feel respected in my own home. She looked surprised when I said that. I don't think anyone had ever framed it to her that way before. Andrew stepped in and told her that this is our house and that we're a team. He said he loves her, but he expects her to treat me as his partner, not as the help. He said future visits would come with shared responsibilities or shorter stays. That moment changed everything. Carol was quiet for a long time. Then she sighed and said she didn't realize how much she was taking for granted. She didn't fully apologize, but she did say she could have handled it better. She agreed that if she stays again, she'll clean up after herself. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Since then, Andrew and I have been working on boundaries. He's been more proactive about checking in with me when his mom is involved. We've agreed on clear expectations for future visits, including length of stay and shared chores. I still feel cautious. I know old habits don't disappear overnight. But for the first time since this started, I don't feel like I'm fighting alone. This whole situation taught me that small conflicts often reveal deeper issues. For us, it wasn't about dishes. It was about partnership and whether my husband sees me as his teammate or someone who has to accommodate everyone else. I'm still figuring out how I feel about Carol. Things are polite but distant. I don't know if we'll ever be close, but I no longer feel invisible. Update: my mother-in-law exploded after I asked her to do her own dishes. I wasn't planning to write again, but enough time has passed and things have settled in a way I didn't expect. So this feels like the right place to close the loop. It's been a few months since Carol's visit and the follow-up conversation, and the emotional dust has finally settled. Not in a dramatic, everything is perfect way, but in a realistic, this is our new normal way. Carol did come to stay with us again last month. This time, it was only for 4 days. Before she arrived, Andrew and I talked through everything. Who would cook which nights, how cleanup would work, what our expectations were. It felt awkward to plan something so basic, but it also felt empowering. When Carol arrived, I could tell she was on her best behavior. She was polite. She thanked me for meals. The first night after dinner, she picked up her plate and washed it without being asked. I stood there pretending not to notice because I didn't want to make it a thing, but inside I felt an enormous sense of relief. There were still moments of tension. Old habits don't disappear overnight. Once or twice, she left things in the sink, and Andrew immediately stepped in and handled it without looking at me or making it my problem. That alone meant more to me than any apology ever could. At one point, Carol made a comment about how she never had these kinds of rules at her parents' house when she was younger. Andrew calmly said that every household is different and this is what works for us. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound defensive. He just sounded firm. I almost cried in the other room when I heard that. Our relationship isn't warm, but it's functional. We're civil. We don't avoid each other. I don't feel like I'm bracing myself the entire time she's here. That's a huge change. As for Andrew and me, this situation ended up forcing conversations we probably should have had years ago. About boundaries, about loyalty, about what being married actually means. We even started couples counseling, not because things were falling apart, but because we realized how easily they could if we kept avoiding hard topics. One thing the therapist said stuck with me. Conflict doesn't ruin relationships. Avoidance does. I don't feel guilty anymore for speaking up. I see now that staying silent would have slowly built resentment that would have poisoned everything. I also understand now that Andrew wasn't intentionally choosing his mother over me. He was repeating patterns he learned long before I was in the picture. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. Carol and I may never be close, and I've made peace with that. I don't need her approval. I just need mutual respect. And for now, that's what we have. If I could go back, would I phrase things differently in that initial moment? Maybe. But I don't regret standing up for myself. That moment forced everyone to see the imbalance that had been quietly accepted for years. My home finally feels like mine again.